All right. Welcome to the March 7th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting for MSAD 51. Thank you everybody for being here. I am going to move some things around on the agenda because I know that there's a big conversation here about masks tonight, and so I want to make sure that we prioritize that. So I am going to move our item for action, which is our vote. I'm going to move things around. So our presentations will first be the mask presentation. I will then offer a public comment for any of those that would like to speak about that specific plan. And then I will open it up to the board for a vote. We will then move on to after that vote, we will do the presentation on the turf fields and then open up public comment for anything other than masks. I just want to acknowledge that I know most people are here for this, so we don't need to wait till the end of the meeting to vote. So, our first item is recognition. And a couple of weeks ago, or one of our last meetings, we opened up the meeting with a poetry read from one of our students, and we want to try and do a little bit more of that. And with the accomplishments that the debate team had over the past few weeks, we asked them to come do a short debate for us tonight. So, Mr. Curry, would you like to welcome two of your members this evening?
Good evening. Thank you very much. I would like to give you an update. 3 weeks ago now, the debate team took part in the Maine State Championships and the qualifiers for the National Catholic Forensic League. Maine gets to qualify 4 students for the NCFL Nationals, which are held in Washington, D.C., and the Greeley High School team beat Yarmouth, Kennebunk, Scarborough, Bangor, and all other competitors to take 3 out of the 4 spots that Maine gets to go to nationals and to win, hands down, the state championship. Two days ago, on Saturday, we had the National Speech and Debate Association Finals, which is another organization that Greeley and most of the schools in the state of Maine are involved in. Maine only, due to the numbers, the low numbers in registration for that tournament, Maine only got 2 kids who qualified to go to nationals. One of them is a Greeley student, and the first alternate, should either of the top 2 not be able to go, is with us tonight as one of those students. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ruth Weeks and Meredith Brubaker, who are going to read for you their 3-minute speeches on the topic of abolishing the death penalty.
Thank you. The order in which speeches are given go authorship, affirmative, and negation. This is a speech in the affirmation of abolishing the death penalty, and what will follow me is a speech in the negation of abolishing the death penalty. Oftentimes we, as they like to say, play the devil's advocate in order to enhance debate in all forums. So sometimes we don't go on the things we believe in, but we oftentimes like to enhance debate. And with that, I'd like to begin if you all seem ready, so I guess I'll start.
We're ready.
According to the American Civil Liberties Union, the death penalty is, quote, an intolerable denial of civil liberties and is inconsistent with our fundamental values of a democratic system, unquote. And most of our nation couldn't agree more. We are a democratic people, and the death penalty goes against all we stand for as citizens and as representatives, so stand with me and affirm this legislation. Though for many years the death penalty has been normalized, it is inherently inhumane. No matter what, this sentence is irreversible and unjust. To the average citizen, the ability for your government to put you to death, better yet, the system you put your faith and allegiance into to protect you, to put you to death, is terrifying. And besides, the system of the death penalty is rigged against the average constituent. It supports those of higher income with their ability to hire better lawyers and better civil protections than that of a lower income constituent who will be assigned a run-of-the-mill lawyer working for minimal pay. According to the ACLU, quote, socioeconomic class also determines who receives a death sentence and who is executed, unquote. In addition to this, the 8th Amendment of the Bill of Rights states, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. This death penalty is both cruel and unusual, making it intolerable in the eyes of the law and in our very founding fathers. According to an NPR report in 2020, autopsies of the bodies of prisoners giving lethal injection report a very torturous and even slow manner of death. Autopsies of several inmates dissected by doctors Joel Zavad and Mark Edgar revealed that 87% of prisoners given the injection experience a medical condition called pulmonary edema, where the lungs fill with fluid and prisoners essentially drown without even being underwater. You cannot tell me that this is not cruel. You cannot tell me that this is not unusual. The negation will say what they will, but you must understand, representatives, that science has proven that the current manner of the death penalty is inhumane, cruel, and unusual. I now want to present the cost benefits of saving lives. According to the Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury, it costs 48% more to pursue a death penalty trial than a prosecutor seeking life imprisonment. It could be argued that once a convict has been sentenced to death and then executed, these costs would be overcome. However, this is a misguided claim, because according to a Susquehanna University report, a death row inmate costs $1.12 million more than a general population inmate. And a 2008 report done by the California state government found that the death penalty system cost the nation $137 million, but if we were just to reduce the maximum punishment to life imprisonment, this would reduce our costs to $11.5 million annually. This stark contrast is yet another reason why the death penalty is outdated. Representatives, we must finally bring rest to this archaic practice that has brought too many to rest unpeacefully. You must stand with me in the strong affirmation of this legislation presented before us today. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so my speech is the direct opposite of Ruth's speech, and I will be arguing, I guess, why the death penalty is constitutional and why it should not be abolished. Representatives, we must vote to fail this bill to protect our citizens from the profoundly dangerous criminals capable of committing capital offenses defined by American statutory law as first-degree murder, treason, espionage, terrorism, and even certain cases of rape and abuse. It is undeniable that capital punishment provides the most severe and irreversible consequence of death for the most severe and violent crimes. But by keeping this consequence of capital punishment as an option open to our government and judicial system, we leave an appropriate consequence that suits the actions and offenses committed by a truly violent criminal. In the history of our country, the death penalty has come in and out of legality since 1972. In 1972, the Supreme Court outlawed the death penalty because the methods of execution were deemed to be cruel and unusual and therefore in direct violation of the Eighth Amendment. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, methods of execution preceding 1976 consisted of death by firing squad, hanging, lethal gas, and electrocution. The extremely cruel, humiliating, and torturous nature of each of these execution methods puts them in direct violation of the Eighth Amendment, which states that the government must not inflict any cruel nor unusual punishments. While these methods of execution are in violation of the Eighth Amendment, the current method of execution used by our government is not. Lethal injection has been the primary execution method in this country since 1976. Lethal injection is not in violation of the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution because it does not involve cruel torture of the criminal. A criminal is put to sleep under a paralytic and then is administered a cocktail of drugs that shuts down their organ function, thus killing them. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution reads, "No one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." This sentence is the only command of the Constitution so important that it is stated twice in the document. It is stated a second time in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. No one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The phraseology of this commandment implies that an individual may in fact be stripped of their rights to life, liberty, or property after undergoing due process of law, fair treatment through the judicial system. Thus, if someone has been convicted of a capital offense and they have undergone due process of law with a fair trial and a fair jury, if that jury determines that capital punishment is the adequate consequence for the crime committed, the death penalty is in fact constitutional. We must consider the possibility that the violent criminals capable of committing capital offenses of this caliber would be more of a burden to our prison systems to keep alive. The criminals that have been sentenced to death would likely receive a lifelong sentence if this amendment were to be approved, providing these capital offenders with the lifelong sentences leaves the possibility that they will escape that they will act violently toward other inmates, or that they will provoke and cause problems in prison. So I urge you to fail today's legislation, not only to maintain the integrity of our prisons and justice system, but to maintain the precedent that has been set by our very own Supreme Court. Thank you.
That was so powerful. Nice job. Thank you both. Congratulations. Madison, you have any comments as a member of the debate team?
One thing that they couldn't show you is that after they give those speeches, if it's the first speech that they give, they go through 2 minutes of questioning. Sorry, I'm kind of messing with my mic. They go through 2 minutes of questioning, and they handle their questions incredibly well every time I've ever seen them answer questions. If you heard any flaw in their speech, someone would have targeted it, and they would have had to defend it. So that is unnoticed, but incredible that they can do that.
Awesome. Thank you all so much again. All right, we will move on for approval of the February 7th, 2022 minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Those abstaining? Thank you. Okay, so out of order from the agenda originally posted, but we are going to move up the presentation from Superintendent Porter on the mask optional plan. Sure, I will do my best. Thanks for letting me know.
All right, good evening. Tonight I'm going to be presenting the mask optional plan as part of the Guerrilla Goes Green update, which I provide to the board virtually every meeting, or at least every month. So today, or tonight, is March 7th's version of this plan. And as I've presented since the beginning of the school year when the GGG plan was adopted, our goal has been keeping kids and staff in school in person, full-time, all year. And we've done that through a layered preventative approach. This is our current information or data for the district, as I've been providing for the entire school year at this point. So as of today, there are significant changes in state guidance. That's one of the few times that I've been able to say that this year since the last meeting. Our county transmission is currently in medium, as the federal CDC has provided that metric as of last week. We've had 623 cases, positive cases in our district since September, which is 65 more than the last time I updated you on February 7th. There's been no changes, significant changes in pool testing enrollment. We have about 1,700 people enrolled in pool testing at this point in our district. And we have had 135 positive pools to date since we started pool testing back in October, or September actually. We've had just 8 since the last update, so that's 8 over the last month. So those numbers look significantly better than they have over the last few months. So just to give you an idea about positive case counts since the beginning of the school year, you can see the trend. Obviously right after the December break is when it spiked, went up to 150 cases that week and stayed there for a couple of weeks, and we are back down to levels that we had seen in the late fall for case counts. So we're down to around 18 cases right now, averaging per week, the last couple of weeks, week before vacation and this week. So definitely a huge improvement in the number of cases. We continue to track our staff in student data, vaccine data. We continue to post this on our website. All this information is posted on our website. So you can see that our staff vaccination data ebbs and flows a little bit, but is maintained for the most part, is up slightly at most of our schools. Again, we have staff that come and go occasionally, so that might skew a number there, but generally pretty strong staff vaccination rates. Our student vaccination rates at the elementary level continue to improve slightly, and that's just dependent on parents giving us the information, so I know that there's probably students that are vaccinated at the elementary level. We just haven't been given the information, so we don't record it unless we have it, but it gives you an idea. We've also been tracking student and staff absent data. These numbers have stayed pretty steady since the last update. So we're anywhere from 4 to 8% on any given day for student absences. That's actually not atypical at this point for, being at the beginning of March. Most years we'd be somewhere in there because of just typical absences for flu and colds and stuff like that. Our staff absences continue to be a little bit higher. They've averaged between 6 and 9%. As you can see, several weeks ago, there were 10, even over 10%. It's not on this list. Our staff have been more susceptible to COVID. A lot of it is COVID-related absences. But again, nothing out of the ordinary and definitely, certainly within more normal ranges over the last few weeks. State and federal guidelines have changed significantly. Maine CDC and the MDOE have shifted face masking guidance in the schools. They've now made it an optional piece instead of a recommendation, which means that the state no longer is pretty much hands-off when it comes to face masking. They're no longer placing it for any reason. They did tie their recommendation to a lot of other state rules, which they have untied those as of 2 weeks ago to all of the state rules that they had been tying face masking to, such as contact tracing, quarantining, and even pooled testing. A lot of things were very much linked, and they've been unlinked by the Department of Education in Maine. As I mentioned earlier, we're in medium status according to the federal CDC. So they have changed the status from high to medium. It's the first time, I think, in almost a year that Cumberland County has been in that status. Federal Transportation Administration has now removed mask requirements for school buses. Those would have been a requirement that we could not have gotten around with the Department of Transportation in Washington. But it was supposed to end on March 18th, and they decided to end that requirement early, which is good. Virtually all school districts are moving to mask optional status in the Portland area. There's one district that I know that is still questioning it. However, I believe that they are also moving in that direction at this point. And state rules still do apply, and this is actually a state rule and not a recommendation. We confirmed that with the Department of Education, that students and staff who test positive for COVID must be out for 5 days minimum until they are over their symptoms, and that once returned, they must wear a mask for the next 5 days, days 6 through 10, after returning to school, and must distance or be in an alternative space while eating and unmasked during days 6 through 10. So that has not changed, and that is a state rule. That's not a recommendation. So the mask optional plan is linked, and I'm not going to I won't go to the link at this point, but there's a link in this presentation. There's a link in letters that I have sent home. The summary of this plan is that we are following the current CDC and MDOE guidance with having a mask optional status for the district. The plan calls for proposed beginning of mask optional for the district tomorrow, Tuesday, March 8th, for all schools and buses, vans, grounds. Emphasis on personal choice for masking. There should be no pressure for someone to decide to mask or not mask. And our staff have we've begun the process with administrators last week and having these conversations. District is providing at no cost KN95 and N95 masks to students and staff starting tomorrow who would like them. And each school has a procedure for doing that, and it has either communicated or will be communicating that procedure. If all else fails, go to the nurse's office in your school, and they have those. No remote school options will be provided as a result of moving to mask optional. The biggest reason for that is that we do not have enough staff to do that. We just don't have it. Accommodations are based on mask optional status will be made only as required by law. So if it's something that the law is requiring because of an accommodation for a student, then we will follow it, but otherwise we will not be doing that. We must continue to follow state rules for students and staff who test positive. I mentioned that's still a state rule. This plan calls for ending capacity limits for spaces like the one we're in right now. And gymnasiums, we'd had 50% capacity limits that the board had approved at the beginning of the school year, and this plan would get rid of that, although we're still just asking our administrators just be careful with discretion for large events, making sure we're not overfilling a space. There is no metric included in this plan, so as a result of having no metric, if the conditions of the pandemic, which hopefully are on the outs at this point, but for some reason, if they return at some point and we are concerned about those conditions, then I would bring it to the board of directors, either at the next regular meeting or at an emergency meeting of the board, according to this plan, and the board would make the final determination as to what it would like to do. And there is a possibility, I'm just going to name it, and it's right in the plan, that there's a potential of increased staff absences. I think adults are a little more susceptible to being out if they are to experience COVID. And we have a range of staff and adults at different age groups. So there is that potential. We have been struggling with staff absences due to COVID most of the year. We have been shorthanded. We have filled all of our staff positions at this point in our district, or just about virtually all of them, as we would typically do in any typical year. But because of illnesses, as I showed you, the percentage for staff is higher than student absences. So I don't feel like I'm being responsible unless I say this. There is always the potential for a day that has to be read, or it's a made-up day at the end of the school year, because we just don't have enough staff to open our schools. And I'm not saying that that should be a consideration in looking at this plan. It just feels like it's something I need to say. So I thought this would be an easier way to look at all of this. What are we continuing if this plan is approved by the board tonight, and what are we stopping? We've stopped a lot of things, and I didn't put them on the list. I've been updating the board as we go along. There's a list of things that we have stopped or changed since September, but these are things that we would continue and stop just since the last update that I gave you in February. So we would continue asking families to make sure that students are checking for symptoms in the morning. If they don't feel well, they're staying home. Pool testing. We think pool testing is important. It's a good weekly marker. It's free, and people will know if there's an undetected COVID case, and we can follow up with that in school. And we have 70% of our students and staff participating in pool testing, and I think it's a great program. I personally have been participating since the beginning, and I think it's something that I'd like to continue with for the rest of the school year. The Department of Education is fully invested in pool testing and is highly recommending that schools continue with that. It's just a way of making sure everybody is healthy and safe this school year. Continuing, obviously, with the state rules around days 6 to 10. We already talked about that. Distancing when eating, we've talked about it. Cleaning, sanitation, ventilation, hand washing. All of our ventilation and air handling units are at the maximum level. They have been at the maximum level since the pandemic started, and we'll keep them. It sometimes is cold in rooms, but that's because we've cranked them up to 100% for maximum airflow. We'll continue with Binax now testing on the spot. If a student or staff member is symptomatic at school, we will Binax test them if a parent wants us to, and that's all by permission. Tracking vaccination rates. We'll continue to inform the board for student and staff vaccination numbers at each update, and we'll continue doing weekly reporting on our website and in our newsletter of positive COVID cases and positive pools, as we have been doing. So those are things that will continue. Things we're stopping since the last update: universal face masking requirement if this plan is approved, physical distancing, contact tracing and quarantines, which we had already stopped in January, but I just want to reiterate that would not have to resume per the Department of Education. capacity limits in larger areas in our district, and we will not be reporting student and staff absences per this plan unless the board would like us to. We just feel like at this point it's become redundant. Going forward, the COVID advisory group, I know there's been members of that group. They've been a great assistance to me all year in making recommendations to the board, but at this point we do not have a meeting scheduled. The reason is that I think the role of the advisory group is changing. At this point, the advisory group would just be convened if there's an issue to be discussed, and if there's a reason that I need to inform the board about anything to do with the pandemic. So I think this group will have a lower profile or lower amount of work going forward. They were meeting pretty regularly, and at this point we're not going to schedule meetings. We'll only schedule them if something comes up and I need to get their advice on any particular area. And so I do plan, unless the board would like me to stop, at this point I'm planning to continue updating the board regularly on just everything to do with the Greeley Goes Green plan. My next update would be April 25th, which will just provide more information. So that is the GGG update, plus the mask plan kind of rolled into everything.
Thank you, Jeff. So what I'd like to do now is
Can we ask questions before we go to public comment?
I'd like to save that for discussion in between voting, if that's all right. So I would like to offer anyone to approach the podium. Please state your name and town you reside in, and please share any comments related to this plan. And just as a reminder, everyone has 3 minutes, and I will do my best to not interrupt you mid-sentence if I have to.
Good evening, board. My name is Josh McHenry. I live in North Yarmouth. And thank you, Superintendent Porter, for going over the plan. I'm just speaking on behalf of my family. I emailed the board this morning, and the plan looks like a good one. We just think it's too soon. We would like to see the board wait on this plan until Cumberland County meets the low guideline instead of medium. You could see in the data presented tonight, cases in the district are still just as high as they were in the fall. So yes, they're lower than the peak, and that's great, but they're not gone. We're not out of this yet. So our request is humbly and respectfully to ask you to just wait to enact this plan until we meet the benchmark of either officially exiting the pandemic from the WHO or meeting the Cumberland County low guideline. So that's our request. I think it's a good plan, just not yet. We're not there yet. It's like if you were to have a course of antibiotics prescribed and take the first 3 days of pills and then stop because you're feeling better, we're just inviting this thing to come back if we stop too quickly. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I sent an email out recently to the board members, and I've edited a little, and I want to read it to you. Dear members of the MSAD 51 School Board, my name is Allie Anderton. My husband and I live in Cumberland with our 2 kids. I'm here to ask that you seriously consider voting to allow our kids to go mask optional in the fall, in school. Our daughter is in 10th grade at Greeley. She has yet to enjoy high school. She comes home every day tired and sometimes with a headache from having a mask on all day. She has a hard time concentrating in school because of it and has yet to see a single one of her teachers' faces without a mask, or her school friends, as wearing a mask makes everything so impersonal. Thankfully, they're optional at our church. I loved high school when I was there many, many years ago. I went to a GHS, but in a different state. And I'm hoping that she will someday enjoy it before she graduates in about 2 years. Sorry. Our son just hates wearing masks. Both our kids are sick and tired of it, wearing them in school. And I can't express how much I dislike sending them to school with them. I wanted to mention an even bigger reason I have is why I'm asking you. to consider voting for mask optional. Mental health. I personally know of some amazing young women who have had a rough time for about a year. They have either gotten help or are getting it. But as a mother of a teenage daughter who is close friends with these young women, it is tough to watch these amazing young women go through what they are going through. These are the reasons why I ask those of you who are undecided to seriously consider making them optional. That way those who wish to keep wearing masks may do so, and those who choose to go without masks may do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. If I could just say one thing, I think that it's really important that we respect everybody's comment, and if we could maybe just hold our clapping. I think everybody's coming from a place that's true, and they're speaking some very vulnerable things, and I don't think it's fair to clap for one side and not the other. And if we could respect that, I think that would be really great. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Jason Curry, MSAD 51 Education Association, teacher here at the high school for 24 years. I would like to request, beg, plead, that perhaps this plan, which looks like a good plan, which has the support of staff in the fullness of time, perhaps be amended with an effective start date of Monday, March 14th. There are three particular reasons why the feedback that I received from my peers over the last week, and especially today after school, would suggest that moving this to Monday the 14th would be a wise decision. Number one, there are a lot of parents who have held off on talking to their kids about this plan until they know that it passes. And implementing it literally overnight means that those parents haven't had that much of an opportunity to counsel their kids about the inevitability of it, about the guarantee of it taking place. Likewise, reason number two, the staff. We've received feedback that kids are worried about being in our classrooms and whether or not we would favor kids who choose to go without a mask or kids who would go with a mask. Give us the rest of this week to talk to our classes. We have those relationships with our students. We want those relationships to thrive and survive this decision. If you make this decision effective overnight, it takes away our opportunity to talk with our students and get them to a safe space where they understand that we as their teachers will be equally supportive of them no matter which decision that they make. Also, we feel that the science supports giving this the rest of this school week to ride out, because people who went away for school vacation in February might still transmit COVID if they're asymptomatic and they don't know that they have it for the duration of this week. If they got it on a Saturday or a Sunday when they were flying home from a trip on February vacation, whereas by this time next week, those students will no longer be symptomatic at all. And therefore, if they choose to go maskless in school, the effects will be no. So that's why we ask that if the wisdom in this plan is to be carried out, we think the best course of action is not to implement it overnight. Give us till Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Record. I am a resident of Cumberland. I have 3 children in 3 schools, and I've been a teacher for 25 years in special ed and regular ed, and I work in a different system. This morning, I was able to greet every single one of my students as they entered our classroom with a hello and a smile. A simple smile of hello, something I have not been able to do since March 12th, 2020. With masks being optional at the school I teach in, today I was able to whisper words of encouragement that were heard when a child was struggling, show a smile of praise for a job well done, Show a look of surprise when a child did something unexpected. Show my class the difference when saying the short vowel sounds, which sound so very similar to young learners. I was able to show my struggling learners that the number 13 has a beginning sound with the tongue out, and the number 14 begins as a lip biter sound. I was able to mouth the beginning of an answer to someone who was trying to find the word that he was so hard struggling to find. I was able to see a look of despair when a child needed to use the bathroom, and I sent him right away before a toileting accident, even before the potty dance began. I was able to catch a bloody nose and use tissues when in the past the blood collected in a child's mask and then blood ended up all over their face. I saw eyes tracking when we were reading and not getting blocked by masks popping up too high over noses. I not only heard my learners' excitement, but also saw their faces of joy, mouths open, when we met our new math character, Linus the Minus. I was able to finally see the child who kept making all those noises during our writing lessons. I saw a child's sparkling white teeth when they came to school late after their dentist appointment. I saw a birthday girl's shy smile when she was the center of attention as we sang to her. And every child left our classroom today with a goodbye and a smile. Something has not happened since March 2020, and that was just what happened today. Communication is more than the words we say. Teaching is more than the words we say. To quote Mother Teresa, we shall never know all the good that a simple smile can do. Please vote in support of optional masking. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll do my best to lean down into the microphone here. So Brandon Cohen, Cumberland, a parent with these two guys. Do you want to break up the 3 minutes each, or can we just kind of go? I won't take very long, however you want to do it.
I'll tell you when your 3 minutes is up. We'll
Perfect.
take it from there.
So just want to speak in support of going mass optional. I know we're kind of behind the other districts at this point now, but given the science, given what Jeff presented, I just want to throw my support behind it. I've got two kids that one is home. He's doing incredibly well home without having to deal with the masks and everything. My other guy, I'll let him talk. He's doing well as, at school, but the masks are a real struggle. And now that we know what we know, just would, appreciate moving forward with the plan. So, you want to talk? You take it up. You want to talk? Your 3 minutes is ticking, baby. You got to go.
You'll do a great job. We're not scary.
They're all friendly.
My name's Boyd Cohen. No, I'm fine.
No?
I'm fine.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks, buddy.
My name is Graham Cohen, and I think that we should have masks be optional because I have to wear one all day, and I'm all hot, and I don't like wearing a mask all day. It doesn't make me feel good, and it's hard to concentrate. I think that we should make masks optional. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bouchard Simpson. I live in Cumberland, and I'm speaking tonight because wearing masks has basically made my school year really annoying. For one, I wear glasses, but this year I was almost forced to get contacts, which are really expensive and a pain to use. I had to get them because my glasses would always fog up so I could not see anything at school. Another reason is because you cannot ever see other people's faces, which makes it harder for kids who might be shy to interact with others. When you see a face of a friend, it makes you recognize them, and it might be easier for other kids to do that. You can also make wearing masks required for those who are not unvaccinated. That will make the unvaccinated kids get vaccinated. Also, I do not think it was fair for us to be made to wear masks when some refuse to wear them and get sick. It is really hard to hear others and for them to hear you when you're wearing a mask. This makes it harder to learn and also leads to more problems. In band, most of it is chaos because lots of the notes get messed up when the mask gets interfered with the reed. This is because of all the masks getting in the way of your instrument. Overall, it seems unfair to us that we have to wear masks and suffer. Some don't mind or are too shy to speak up, but lots of us, including me, think masks should be optional. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris. I live in Cumberland. I have 2 kids, one in MIW and one in the middle school. First off, I just wanted to say that, we're so happy at the school. The teachers are amazing. The administrators that we communicate with are amazing. So, and kudos to all you guys for, a thankless and challenging job of volunteering to be on the school board. So I wanted to speak just in support of the optional masking plan. I thought it was well thought out, and it represents a much needed shift for our school and our community. But I'm obviously concerned that that it might not actually pass, and in light of that, there's just a few points I want to bring up. One is that I feel like there's often a tendency to underestimate the negative effects that masks have on our kids, their education, their mental health, their social skills. And one of the things I'm always reminded of when I think of this point is even, watching the school board meetings, half the time I can't tell which one of you is even talking. And, then I think of kids having to do this on an entire day. So there is an effect, and the reality is we won't know what that effect is until years from now. There'll be a cohort of kids. So the other thing is I think there's a tendency to overestimate the protection that cloth masks provide. In the age of Omicron here, if you really start to look at comparisons of schools that had mask mandates and removed them, you haven't seen a spike up, in a lot of cases, in comparisons of communities that do have them and don't. And this is, in the more recent stage of this pandemic. Other thing that, we're all reminded of after vacation is, anybody who's gone to a sporting event or a ski lodge, a restaurant, all these other places where people are either not wearing masks at all or wearing them improperly, we're constantly reminded that there's a contradiction here when we're asking our kids to mask when you go to these other places and, all of us who are more at risk than them are not being asked to mask at all. So there's obviously a piece of this that doesn't make sense. So, more
Chris,
so.
I just want to say you have hit 3 minutes. If you want to finish up, that would be great.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you.
good. So I think I will just leave it there. I guess the last thing I would just say is around public messaging. I'd like to see our kids not be scared to death of this thing when they don't need to be. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Riley Began, and I want masks to be optional because in school, I'm in Spanish class, and sometimes it's hard to hear him, say Spanish words, and I never know what he's saying, and it's just hard because I don't know what he's saying. Also, when I walk around in school, my glasses fog up, and it's really annoying because it's hard to see. My face also gets hot, and it's sometimes hard to breathe, and I've never seen my teachers' faces. Also, I get 5-minute snacks, which is kind of annoying, and I just want masks to be optional. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Valenti from North Yarmouth. and I am the father of a first grader, an MIW. And thank you for your service and your work on all of this tonight. I don't consider myself pro-mask or anti-mask, but I am pro-student. I've been in education policy and reform for over 10 years now, with a degree in psychology and education from Columbia University. I've worked in infectious disease research and education research at the University of Chicago. I'm here to just note my disappointment with the board on this issue. It's a difficult job, and I thank you for it, but I wrote a letter to you in August offering my support and asking questions on your insights in regards to the holistic impact of masking students. What social emotional impact did you consider? How would you limit the harm of kids not seeing each other's faces constantly and constantly seeing each other not as friends, but as vectors of transmission of a deadly disease? I didn't get a response. I came to a fall board meeting with this being the focus with an open mind. But it quickly became clear that this wasn't a data-informed decision, but rather one based on a presumed assumption that masks equals being in school 5 days a week, that there was no natural immunity. The kids were at serious risk. You talked like the only metric that mattered was vaccine rates. And what we've seen this year, despite the masks, we've seen high degrees of transmission, we've seen an increase in social emotional issues, we've seen harm on our students and community unrelated to the respiratory virus. I'm happy we're coming to a mask optional solution, and I support this plan, but I'm concerned that the main driver for decisions of this board, I'm concerned about the main driver for decisions for this board. Nothing significant changed data-wise since the fall. Transition may even be higher now, but we knew that most of our adults were protected. We knew science behind the effectiveness of masks, masking children in cloth masks, was questionable at the very best, especially against something like Delta or Omicron. We knew the risk to children was lower than RSV and flu, and nothing has changed significantly, yet we find ourselves much more agreeable to an optional masking, coincidentally, when the political winds have changed. Let me repeat, my kids are my concern, not Republican or Democrat talking points. I'm concerned about your approach on this issue because it reflects a decision matrix that is anything but student-centered. Yes, COVID metrics matter, but tell us what else you're considering in these decisions. That's what I do as a parent and what I expect you to do as a board. I hope I'm wrong, but as someone that works on improving schools across the country, I know we have a lot of work to do in this room for our kids. Thank you.
Hi, Zach Bouchard from Cumberland, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for all the work you've done and all the stuff you've had to put up with. This is a very well thought out plan. You're following the science, you're following the latest data, you're following the CDC, and you're navigating a very difficult situation. And yeah, just thank you so much. And I do support the plan.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Smith, and I'm from North Yarmouth. We are 2 years into dealing with COVID. We now know that cloth masks offer little to no protection against COVID. So it's past time, to let families choose what is best for them. Wear a mask if you choose. However, that should not be something that is forced upon our children. Mask mandates need to end, and they need to end now. In our attempt to deal with a new virus, we reacted. We tried to do what was best. In looking back at the last 2 years, I fear that in an attempt to keep our kids from getting a virus that is of little serious danger to them, we, as a society, have caused them emotional harm. In some cases, that harm, they will heal from that harm. And in other cases, unfortunately, I don't think they will heal. It will cause lifelong effects. For those who say it's just a mask, in reality, it's a constant reminder to be afraid. It hides facial expressions, which are a large part of communication. Our faces, our smiles, they're part of who we are. We are removing the smile to another when we pass them in the hall, the look of a student that shows that they either understand or don't understand the teacher's lesson, Masks make it harder to hear muffled voices. Masks also dehumanize people, which is especially harmful in developing children. Obviously, I want mandatory masks removed, but I also want to address something that is very important and very tragic for our kids. We are breeding an atmosphere of fear in our schools. This must stop. The damage being done to our kids is significant and potentially long-lasting. Anyone who's worked with kids and anxiety knows that by reinforcing a fear, we are making the anxiety stronger. We're feeding that anxiety. Some fear helps us to protect ourselves. We see a large bear heading towards us in the woods. Our amygdala tells us, the flight or fight part of our brain tells us be scared. And that's good, because we really don't want to run into a bear. However, irrational fears hinder our quality of life. Currently, we are reinforcing a fear in our children that is not rational. Have we ever terrified our kids about the flu? No. We encourage them to wash their hands, eat healthy, get rest. But now we're telling our youth that they must wear a piece of cloth over their face to be safe. It's not rational. Again, at first we didn't know, but we now know. There's no science to support this. A survey was sent out today to some schools, and I'm not sure if it was all schools or just some, but students were asked, are they afraid of taking masks off? Are they uncomfortable around unmasked people? Are they afraid of unvaccinated people not wearing masks? Science does not support any of these as being rational fears. To deal with fears, we face them. I hope that's why the questions were asked, so our schools would know what are the crippling fears we need to deal with our kids. But prior experience tells me that this is probably not the case. They were likely, as they appear, leading questions to encourage kids to be scared of removing masks, to be scared of unvaccinated people, when science clearly shows this not to be true. This is a disgrace, and we owe our kids better. We owe them a more emotionally healthy learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Erin Pollock, a GHS teacher and also a parent of 2 GHS kids. THINK, think. Many teachers have adopted this 5-letter mnemonic to help students reflect on how they choose to live in real and digital spaces. Here's what these 5 letters represent for me in light of the vote you will cast tonight about making masking optional. T stands for truth. Chairperson McGinley, Superintendent Porter, thank you for attending the meeting with staff last week to hear the truth about what staff are feeling and wondering in the wake of the push to go mask optional. That we are feeling uneasy is an understatement. I am here to speak truth to power. As we witness the crisis in Ukraine, I can't help thinking that this is what happens when powerful voices do not hear or act on the truth. Harm befalls the vulnerable at every turn. H stands for helpful. Are we helping the vulnerable in our MSAD 1 family by going mask optional right now in Maine? The vulnerable include parents of too little for a shot young children. This group clearly overflows into our staff, and my heart broke as the anxious tears of my colleagues were seen and heard on the call last week. I'm not personally in this parent group anymore, but does that mean I shouldn't help minimize their risk? Are we helping our district's medical staff who have given so much to keep us safe up to now, pushing to make masks optional while other mitigation strategies like open windows and outdoor classroom spaces are inaccessible due to the cold Maine weather? I stands for inspiring. Please consider that the inspiring education promoted in our district mission is made possible by educators who themselves feel safe. We can equip students to aspire to high levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs if and only if our own basic needs are being met. Consider that the level of inspiration of this learning may indeed suffer as teachers adapt the way they interact with students to maintain their level of personal safety in a cramped room with greater aerosol circulating around. N stands for necessary. We have seen the necessity of keeping schools open for the good of society as a whole. Consider that any educators speaking up tonight have been faithfully doing what is necessary for our students, giving your kids the best of ourselves. We are tapped out. Staffing has been a struggle throughout stages of this pandemic. Consider that kids may not have their learning needs fully met if staffing struggles return. And finally, K stands for kind. Educators don't just deliver facts and teach skills. We model for students how to make the world a better place with what they learn, how to make choices by thinking about more than how it affects just ourselves. This is kindness lived out. So I ask everyone in reach of my voice right now, is going mask optional at this stage teaching our students the right lesson in how our Rangers can lead the way? Is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I guess we're not clapping for everyone, we're just clapping for one side. Just wanted to clarify.
I shouldn't have gone right after Aaron because mine's very similar. Hi, I'm Holly Susla, a math teacher at the high school. I have 2 points I'd like to make. Getting back to normal is a quote we hear as a reason to go mask optional. Please know that making masks optional in school will do the opposite for many of us teachers and staff. With everyone masked, I have felt safe enough to move around the room and work with students one-on-one. It's felt pretty normal. If masks are optional, I feel like we're going backwards to more like we were when we were hybrid. Me in the front of the room and the kids at their desks. I will not feel safe in school, and not feel safe affects my ability to focus and give my students 100%. I'll change from wearing a KN95 to an N95 mask. These are much more uncomfortable and harder to teach with. I will be looking at my prep time as a time to remove my mask instead of an extra period where I often meet with students that can't meet at other times. A vote to keep masks on for now would be a vote for keeping a more normal classroom structure and for teacher wellness. My other point, being good citizens should be one of the most important things we teach our children. I've heard a lot of I's tonight, I. All year, administration has emphasized the importance of staff to show empathy to our students. The board needs to take this to heart and lead by example. There are students and staff who are or live with someone who is at high risk. By voting to keep masks on, you are showing our students what it means to be empathetic to the vulnerable members in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you tell me when you're going to start, George, and I'll start mine at the same time.
Absolutely.
Ready?
Ready?
1,
Go.
2, 3, go.
George Spino, Cumberland, father of 4 kids. 3 minutes for the future of our children. When you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. George R.R. Martin, A Clash of Kings. At the board meeting on August 16th, 2021, I made the following points. Fast forward to 3051 if you're following along at home. Yeah, it's the same shirt. Cloth masks are ineffective, the virus is aerosolized, the particles are too small. There is no difference in mask wearers versus non-mask wearers. SARS-CoV-2 has animal reservoirs. Omicron looks to have had come from mice, by the way. The risk of mental health damage to our children is greater than that of COVID. Wearing a mask teaches our kids and really everyone that everybody around them is a deadly threat. Our kids have been on high alert for 2 years. I also warned you that forcing masks will hurt unity in our community. Again, I went unheeded. Now members of this board and administration are pushing LD 1939, an act to protect school administration officials from harassment and abuse. Sounds great, right? No one should be harassed or abused. It's illegal to do that to anyone. However, you read into this a little bit more and you realize that it makes it a Class D crime. That means that harassing any member of the board or school is a worse crime than anyone else being harassed in this room. You forced mask mandates on people's children and they're mad. Now you push for extra rights? When will this stop? Want to foster unity? Allow masks to be a choice and encourage our children to respect those who think differently than them. The federal CDC and the state CDC have let us down. We, the people of Cumberland and North Yarmouth, are the authority here. Saying you were following state guidelines is not an excuse. The second we said we couldn't do contact tracing anymore, the state buckled. This is an election year. Make the politicians work for our votes and to the interests of our community. The us and them, it's not along political ideologies or parties. There's a big club out there, and pretty much everyone in this room is not part of it. Drop all mandates. Make masks optional for everyone. You'll need to revise the plan because it still requires masks on days 6 to 10 after returning to school. Since you're requiring it and providing masks, where are the fit tests? There's no plausible deniability here. On a March 3rd, district newsletter informed everyone there'd be no fit testing for masks provided because they are optional. So which way is it? This madness has to stop. Are they safe to return to school or not? We need to live our lives. We need to move on. It is time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in regards to the mask plan? Oh, yes, lots of people. Okay.
We still got lots.
Hi, I'm Peter Gillingham. I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher. I approach this tonight as an effort to stay green, although not perfect. We're in a better place than we were in the past, and that's my mindset of approaching this. So I want to thank you for your support and fulfilling our goal of staying green this year. I believe that we have made gains in helping students. We are closing gaps. We're developing needed student skills, providing social emotional enrichment, sports, clubs, music, trips, etc. On a daily basis, I see the positive examples of all being at school together. I've had many staff and students come to me with their concerns of being mask optional. There is a fear of spreading the virus in school or in the community. There's a fear of bringing the virus home to family members and other people in the community. I personally worry about students getting sick and missing school, which becomes a hybrid situation for teachers to have to navigate and students to navigate. I hope we don't have this, but I'm concerned of a future surge that could interrupt the positive things we're doing with going green. If you choose to go mask optional, I feel the plan is missing kind of an emergency clause to quickly go back to masking if we needed to. I fear a scenario where a variant could cause a quick surge or a quick spike, and I would want a very quick way to go back to masking, knowing the data takes 2 weeks to get to us. If it took a week or two to then make a decision, you're about a month out. I would ask that you protect all the gains we have been achieving by being green this year. By 1, keeping masking in our school. 2, if we go mask optional, please wait a few weeks to warmer weather so we can more comfortably vent the classrooms with fans. Add the emergency plan I was kind of suggesting, like a clause. I feel the length of this pandemic is tiring for all of us, and we all react in different ways to it. I encourage everyone to not let fatigue or frustration guide us, but to make decisions that are maybe not perfect, but in the best way for us to keep the kids at school and the staff at school and achieving the positive things we have this year. We're a third of the way through, and I kind of want to end strong. So regardless of how you vote, I appreciate your efforts to help us this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Bell. I'm a resident of North Yarmouth. I have my 3 kids with me, and they're slowly losing it, so we're going to make this short and sweet. I do pool testing as a nurse for Falmouth, and I have watched from the beginning in November where the cases were slowly going up and then rapidly going up and have drastically come down. I have been exposed to people with COVID with their masks off all year, students, staff, and I have to tell you, I have watched children who are very little, be afraid to be next to each other, even with a mask on. That's not normal. I've watched children and staff actively walk away from each other because they're afraid to be next to each other. That's not normal. We are raising children that are not normal. It's not healthy for them to feel like this on a regular basis. Childhood is fleeting, and these children have lost 2 years of their lives to this. I also have an autistic child who thrives on seeing emotion. He needs to physically see emotion on faces to understand, and he has not been able to see that for 2 years. It's nice to be able to go out in public and see it, but he interacts with peers here, and he has not been able to learn how to read those emotions. We are also, not in this school, but raising children who read lips, and they have not been able to see mouths or facial expressions for 2 years. It's time for us to move on. I understand if you're scared, you have that right to wear a mask. That's why it's called mask optional. But we need to take this time to think about our future and our children. And like I said, 2 years is a very long time, and I've been exposed to more COVID than a lot of these people in this room with masks off, the dosing that you can get from just being around people. I'm telling you, it's time for us to move on as someone who experiences it on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I live in North Yarmouth, and the only people could understand are the ones that spoke without a mask. And I'm retired, and I read the paper every day. I've been following this. I'm 66, and I was a little concerned at first. But I read a lot about it every day, and it's getting. I personally think I don't have any children now; they're all adults. I think it's child abuse to having these kids with masks on all day long, and I think it's bizarre world looking at you people with all these masks on, saying how they flew off here and flew there, and the truck drivers are coming all over the New England, delivering groceries, this, that. Everybody's mingling. You're not stopping this virus. It's here. This isn't T-ball. 3 strikes, you're out. Let's get real to the real world. We got to move on. It's time to get out of COVID and go on to real life. Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't have to time me, Tyler. I'll keep it under 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Scott, Cumberland, Maine. I echo a lot of the statements that a lot of the folks have said tonight, but I'm going to make it personal. On August 31st, 2021, I attended an IEP meeting for my son with 8 members of his team, which included Julie Olson, Corey Munzie, and Christy Givens, none of who I believe are here tonight. I was told that day by Julie Olson that the district had actual statistical data and analysis to prove that masks do not hurt our children. Again, I repeat, they said they had the data. I even received a follow-up correspondence from the state confirming this statement. To date, I've received no answers from Jeff, Tyler, or Scott Poulin on the so-called statistics and analysis that the district and the school board is using to base this very broad overreach of parental rights and child abuse. Instead, all I've received, after multiple FOA requests, are you ready for this? Was a New York opinion piece. That's what they're basing this mandate on.
Scott, you are addressing the board. Could you
No,
please
I'm
speak?
addressing the community where I live and I pay taxes.
Okay, well, right
I'm a
now
military
we're in a board
veteran.
meeting.
I have the right to say what I feel as a
I agree with you.
taxpayer.
Yep.
And you're going to give me my 3 minutes. Do you hear me, Tyler? Because
I
of the
hear you,
stuff
and
that
I'm
you've
asking
done
you to
in this
speak to the
community.
board.
There
That's
are
all.
oral sex books in our
Okay,
elementary school. In our elementary school.
No, we're not going to do that this
Yes,
evening.
we are going to do that.
You're out of order.
No, I'm not. You
No.
still have not given me the statistics and the data.
Scott,
Where
I'm
is
going
the
to ask
data?
you one last time.
I've got an
to
op-ed.
stay on the topic
I've got an
of
op-ed.
masking.
Where's
there
my
are
statistics?
children in this room.
You've hurt our child.
Thank
you
you.
have mentally hurt our child, and you've never given me the statistics. Not one time. You gave me a New York Post article. That's what you've given me. That's what you based a mask mandate on. That's what Scott Poulin provided, was a New York Post op-ed. Where are the statistics? Where's the data?
I'm not going to respond to you right now.
You haven't
50
responded in an
seconds.
email? You haven't responded in a phone call? All Jeff does is say, oh, we're much more alike than you think. But he can't give us the truth. You can't provide us the truth. You won't provide the truth. This has been a cover, and you know it. This is about money. You've divided this community. What you have done as this board is created a microcosm of division within this community. You've got kids walking around that are scared to take their masks off. Our son gets off the bus and he's scared to come into our house, our own home. He doesn't know if he can take the mask off or keep it on. These kids right here, these children, you've affected a whole generation of our children. If a pandemic actually comes about, I'm scared for what it's going to actually happen based on what you guys have done.
Okay, that's 3 minutes, Scott.
Perfect.
Let's try to be respectful, please.
Nick Began, Cumberland.
Thanks, Nick.
I have a little one here who wants to say a few words.
I want school to be optional because
We're not voting on that
because I'm keep on getting rashes on my face and I'm not getting to see my friends' faces.
Her voice is much sweeter than mine. So again, Nick Began from Cumberland. Really share a lot of the same comments that were already said tonight, so I'm not going to waste everyone's time. But I did read through the plan. I think someone mentioned earlier there should be a measure in there for emergency meeting, which I think it is in there. For you to go back to masking if you choose to do that. I did have a question though, and again, maybe you can answer it in your discussion. But there is a point in there that states that staff members can request if masks are required within their classroom based on whatever it's based on, and that it would be dealt with as a case-by-case basis. So that kind of concerns me. That could cause a slippery slope and just confusion within the schools for the children. With all that being said, I strongly encourage you stand up and support optional masking for our children. We are at a point in this pandemic where we have enough tools in the toolbox to make our own decisions. Folks that want to wear masks should be free to do so, and vice versa. We all have various levels of risk tolerance, some being more risk averse than others. We have enough data at this point where we can confidently say a child is more likely to suffer fatal injuries in a car accident than they are to getting COVID. There's a few other points that were made tonight, and I want to maybe just share a little bit more that, yes, we're medium right now. We were high last week. That's all bogus. It's been stated in several articles that our testing data is so far behind. That's why Yarmouth is testing wastewater, right? I mean, our data that we have is still behind. So I even question, are we medium? I actually think we're low, just because of how backed up we are in the state. Also, the virus today is not the virus it was in the fall. There were a couple comments saying that the virus numbers were lower, or the case counts were lower in the fall. Omicron is not Delta. It's less severe, we know that, so we can't be comparing what's in the fall to where we are right now. And lastly, I find it interesting that the majority of the teachers that came to talk tonight all took their mask off. Why? Do they take their mask off in the classroom? They take their mask off so they can hear and understand you. What is that doing to our children? I just find it very interesting that majority of them took their mask off tonight to speak to you all. So anyway, I'll end with that. I know you all will do what's right. You're all smart people, and it's time to move on.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hannah Berry, Cumberland. Boy, I stood over there for a little while, wondering when I should walk up. So many wonderful things said tonight, I won't repeat it. The number of parents in this room who are here to speak for their kids is almost 100%. Gentlemen here in the front. We are the ones who send our children into this school. We are only here for one reason, and that is to educate and take care of these children during school time hours, the best that we can as a community. I think the parents have spoken that the majority of the parents in this room would like their children to have the option. Whether or not it's for political reasons, science reasons, religious reasons, the fact of the matter is we're all different humans, but we all are speaking up tonight to tell you that our children need better. So I ask that you listen to the parents in this room. I have sympathy for the teachers, I really do, but I have to wear one of these all day at work because I choose to work at Maine Health. It is my choice to work there to help the patients that we serve, and I actually spent all day at Spring Harbor Hospital, so I deal with this morning, noon, and night. And that's my choice because I love what I do. I hope they love what they do, and they will continue to wear the mask if that means they can safely do it for themselves. But our kids need us to give them the choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I apologize for my tardiness. My name is Kim Stewart. I just spent the last 3 hours setting up and celebrating with the Greeley girls basketball team on a tremendous season that many didn't think they'd get very far. So it was kind of a nice showing to see them on Saturday. I don't have a lot to say because I emailed you all asking you to make masking optional in line with the CDC recommendations, which is what you've preached about following this entire time. So I'm not gonna lie, I'll be stunned if you kind of veer off on that. But I just wanted to point out that we all met in a private location. There was not one mask in the room. Oops, I don't know what you're gonna do now, but we all enjoyed it. And when one of the parents got up and introduced everything and spoke, she said, "It is such a joy to see all of your faces and see you smiling and celebrating." And it was the only point in the entire evening that everyone in the room stood up and clapped. And I think that should just speak volumes that a room of 70 people were celebrating being able to get together on a CDC recommendation that they can do so without a mask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Riley Record. I'm a freshman here at Greeley, and I strongly support optional masking. I think we focus a lot on how this is affecting elementary students, and while that is completely true, and it really is, it's also affecting high schoolers too. Just the other day in my Spanish class, we were doing a listening activity, and she was like spelling the words out for us. And there was one point where there was a P and a G, which is pe and he. And while you can clearly understand me right now, 10 feet away from her in a masked classroom, it was really hard. And so it really does affect us. And it's also just really, really annoying to sit there for 6.5 hours every day. And it's hard to focus with this thing on our face. Also, the majority of students I've talked to, they really support this optional masking, and even if they're planning on wearing a mask if this goes through, they think everybody should have the choice, and I would just ask that you
let us have the choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in regards to the masking plan?
Hello, everyone. My name is Maya Douglas. I'm a freshman at Greeley High, and I would just like to say a couple words about the masking. I would hope that the board would, well, it's a great plan. I love this plan. I think it's very well thought out. I would ask that the board would move it or wait until the weather is slightly warmer so that we may have windows open and classes outside. This is because when the windows are open when it's very cold, it is even more distracting than having to wear a mask. It is extremely cold and people have to carry around coats with them, which you already know many Mainers don't like to do. I also thought it was important for me to speak tonight because I mostly saw adults, and while adults have great opinions, they are not going to be the ones directly affected by this. It is going to be the students. And most of the students I've spoken to, mostly just my friends, some people who are not my friends, classroom conversations, have said that they're not quite sure what they're going to do. Most of them really haven't thought about this, so by moving it to the spring, they'll have more time for them to think about this and make thoughtful decisions. And also, kids can't learn if they're sick. I know this is a huge thing. Oh, you know, it's going to affect their learning. They can't learn if they're sick. COVID is very severe when you do get it, even though it is not as, it has decreased in intensity. The flu is also very bad, which the mask has prevented. I have not gotten the flu in 2 years, and I have not had a flu shot in 2 years because of the mask. Also, the quarantine period, I have heard rumors that it is going to be extended to 10 days if we put in this mask optional plan. I have no idea if they are true or not, but if they are, I think many students would wish to keep their mask on. And also remote school. The big pushback last year was back to 5 because so many people hated remote school. What was the compromise for that? It was mask wearing. So many people hate remote school. I think the clear decision here is, would you like to risk having more remote school days, or would you like to risk getting COVID or wearing a mask? Your choice. And also, I have friends from Gray New Gloucester, which, as some of you may know, has just gone back to mask optional. Many of their classmates remained with their mask on, but the ones that took them off, many of them in the past couple of days have gotten sick. Whether this is with COVID or flu, it does not matter. They have gotten sick and they have been out of school for the past few days. And I really think that the whole talk about anxiety, this has helped my anxiety, honestly, because it is a protection of, from fear of COVID, catching COVID. It is a way that I know I am safe. And instead of being crammed in a classroom of dozens of people with the windows maybe open, having it being freezing, and half of them spewing aerosol particles all over the room, I would prefer that we simply wait maybe 3 weeks until the weather starts getting warmer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to do this one last time. Is there anybody else that would like to come speak in regards to the masking plan? Okay, thank you everyone for sharing all sides of this conversation. So now I would like to move the vote that is at the end of the agenda up to now. So I would be looking for a motion for item 9D, please.
Can we discuss it first a bit to clarify?
So I'm just going to ask for a motion and then a second, and then we will discuss before the vote.
Well, I'll move to remove the mask mandate.
And Tyler, just to clarify, if we change the way the plan is written during our discussion, we don't have to go back and redo this, right?
We can amend it after our discussion.
Sure.
Second.
Thank you. All right, so now I'd like to open it up to the board. And what I'd like to do, because I feel like it's important that we all have a chance to speak, is I'd like to just go down and give everybody an opportunity to ask questions, to share feedback.
Say again?
Just speak up. Speak up.
Yes. Yes, we'll do our best. So, Avery, would you mind? I know that you're prepared, so I'm going to ask you to start.
Come
Is that
on,
okay?
you can't do that to me.
But
We've
you-
never gone this way.
I know,
First.
but we talked. And you
It's
said you're
always
prepared.
been Ann first.
Congratulations, you're first today.
Over the past few months, I've heard a lot of student input on whether or not I should vote to go mask optional. I don't think students want masks, but I do believe that a lot of students will continue to see masks as necessary to keep the community safe. However, mandates recently changed. We now have the all clear to go mask optional. If state and federal guidance says that we are all good to go mask optional, then, who are we to supersede that? For the last 2 years, we have followed doctors' guidance, and it'd be pretty hypocritical if we stopped doing that now. I'm not a doctor. These people aren't doctors. Most of you aren't doctors. Why should any of us assume we know anything about the world except our perspective at a given point in time, let alone know more than doctors? I've heard an overwhelming amount of students say that they want mask optional, but would continue to wear them at school. I myself fall in the same boat. For the immunocompromised or teachers who are still skeptical, I will continue to wear a mask out of respect. All I ask is that they respect those who choose not to. This is not an easy vote for anyone. My own mother is an immunocompromised teacher at this very district, but I know too many students who are struggling, and at the end of the day, that's who I represent.
Thank you, Avery.
Alrighty, I second the fact that I was hoping for a little bit of extra time, but it's all right. First, I want to sympathize with the young ladies that came up and shared their discomfort with glasses and masks. This entire meeting, I've been struggling with that. But no matter what I say today, there's someone in the audience who will disagree with me. But as a student representative, I am obligated to share my concerns and the concerns that I have heard from other students. There's some discomfort among students with the fact that unvaccinated students may begin unmasking, and since mask protects others and not oneself, by making masks optional, we are making it optional to protect others. Our own safety would be on other people's hands. It also makes teachers especially susceptible as they see tens to hundreds of students a day, whereas students often have classes with repeating groups of people. Though I agree that tonight we should go mask optional, I think that I think that this needs to be taken into consideration, especially if we start having large outbreaks again, and if that becomes the case, reevaluating the situation. But with that, as mentioned in public comment, a survey was sent out earlier today, but I believe just to high school students by the student government. Unfortunately, I did ask, but we weren't able to get this information back for the board meeting tonight, but I would like to see that at the next meeting just so that we can see student reaction to the potential and just the result of lifting masks. And I also have a couple questions, whether that is for Mr. Porter or Tyler. Does the red day removal also remove red day snow days? Because we're removing the online red days?
So that's a great question. So for any storm days, Madison, we would still have a red day. It would still become a red day. This would be for staff shortages. So if for some reason we had a shortage of staff and we couldn't have one of the schools open, then it would be a red day.
But would we do like online schooling still?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And my second question is, are we still requiring 6 or less people at lunch tables and other distancing requirements? I did look briefly at the plan, but I did not see anything about the cafeteria or
No
eating.
distancing in the cafeteria. The only distancing would be if you're back between 6 and 10 days. And I just want to reiterate, that's a state rule, and we do have to follow that.
So the only distancing that would be done is for COVID positive students after they come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Madison.
So I didn't plan any remarks tonight. I feel like I've been thinking about this issue endlessly for months and months at this point, so I figured I could speak off the cuff. I'm planning on voting for the mask optional plan as written, unless there's some meaningful amendments to it. I've always been a trust the science, risk-averse kind of person. I mean, throughout the fall, I was waiting for our 5 to 11-year-olds to be able to get vaccinated. And once they had the opportunity to do that, I figured we would come back after winter break, like at the beginning of January, and be able to go mask optional. But Omicron happened, and here we are today. Like Avery astutely pointed out, we're not doctors. I'm not an epidemiologist, so I've always been trusting the advice that we've been getting from the doctors in the advisory group, and I think they've guided us really well. The last email exchanges we've had were that if we're in a high-risk setting, that we should be masking. Well, we are not in a high-risk setting anymore. We're technically medium. I was going to make this great point, but Nick Began beat me to it, that the COVID case rate data probably is not valid due to the backlog in cases. And the other metrics that we do know where we don't have a backlog, the hospitalization statistics, are in the low category at this point. So personally, I'm feeling confident that the science has guided us to a place where we should feel safe making masks optional. And if you want to continue wearing a mask, that's great. The one thing that I haven't been able to reconcile yet is the teachers. I think the teachers are an incredibly important stakeholder here, and we rely greatly on them. And the thing that I haven't gotten the answer to yet is, what do we need to do for them to feel safe? Because I don't take the messages that we've gotten from teachers throughout the evening lightly. There's a certain tone of fear that is real. And we have a number of prevention strategies in place. We have masks available, high-quality masks available to everybody. We have vaccinations available. We have good ventilation systems. And I hope that teachers can continue to come to us to articulate what is making them fearful about this, and coming up with some constructive ideas of what we can do to help try to fix this. Because I don't want to disregard that opinion. It's really important. But we need to come to a solution where we can keep our kids in school and move towards not having masks. That's going to work for everybody. I don't have any questions. I think the plan is great as written. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Peter?
Before I continue, I would like a little bit more detail on if a faculty member can require his or her class to wear a mask. That's problematic to me, so I would like a little bit more detail on that.
No, in the plan, that cannot, a staff member cannot, in a mask optional environment, can't require students or other staff to wear a mask or not. There is a provision that was added to the plan later last week. It came from legal counsel, and that might be what I don't know if that's what you're referring to, Peter, but basically it just says that if there is something required by law that would require masking of a certain amount of students or whatnot, then we would have to do that. And the only thing I can't think of anything off the, I think it's just more of if there is something down the road, we want to make sure it's there. And that was recommended by legal counsel. It's more like if there is a peanut-free classroom, for example. We have certain classrooms in the district where there's somebody that has such an allergic reaction that it's actually life-threatening. So nobody in that room can eat peanut butter or have peanuts or anything. It's not just, up to your mouth. It's literally airborne. And we do have some cases like that in our district. So obviously, in order to protect that child, the interest of that child outweigh everybody else in that case. So that's really what that verbiage is in the plan. And it's if something like that is required by law, and there are laws that protect and accommodate, then we have to follow those. And that's the only piece. But
Gail?
otherwise, no.
Well, I think that clarifies it, because I think it raised kind of a red flag on that. In George's most eloquent speech, he did note, and I do agree, that we've been totally not well served by the national CDC, the state CDC, the Department of Education. The social media is probably another major culprit. And again, a lot of it, again, has come back to us to sort it out. Some of the decisions we've probably done a pretty good job of. Others we probably haven't. But you take the information you have and kind of filter it and do the best you can. My thought is that we need to get this country back to normal. I mean, we've got enough issues going on both in the world and in our own country that we just cannot continue with what we've been doing. And so I think it's a very important first step that we go to masks optional, and if all hell breaks loose again with another variant, we can take steps to deal with it at that time. But I intend to support this, and was talking to my wife the other day and just saying I don't know how we would have coped with having to work, raise children and everything, and I just have a lot of empathy and sympathy for and I've had my 3 children have had to deal with it. So it's time to move on. It's time to get the country as much back to normal as we can, and I'm going to vote in favor of it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Always good to follow you, Peter.
Never follow the train
That's
seal
right.
act.
You're throwing us all off, especially not knowing that George had the same shirt on 2 meetings in a row. So, I hesitated from having prepared comments because I did want to hear specifically what everybody said, and I think it's great to have 23 people come in with public comment. And I like the way that, well, for the most part, the respect in the room as we worked through some difficult conversations. And I think it's tough to follow the 2 ladies in debate when clearly they can argue anything, and I think it set us off well. It has been challenging on everybody. Every family has a different level of conversation that happens within the home when you're talking about things like COVID, when you're talking about masking, when you're talking about what to be afraid of and what not to be afraid of. And certainly, nobody ever seeks to be afraid of people that they spend time with. Every student having a different level of support when they work through challenging situations. That feeling of isolation that many people had last year as they were sitting in their bedrooms going to class without having any human interaction. And then certainly every teacher having that need for safety. All of these different things have been part of our lives, and we anchored our discussions over the past 2 years in what the CDC and what the Department of Education and what our physicians said on the Greeley Goes Green platform. And it is difficult, and I agree with Mr. Beeg, and I certainly agree with Tom talking about the backlog that probably does not represent accurate numbers right now, and I think that that's obviously problematic. the questions that we had asked in earlier discussions when we had many members of staff in here is, what degree of safety will you have when vaccines are at a higher level? And I look at the numbers that Mr. Porter shared earlier. Those staff vaccine numbers are very high, and people have looked out for their health and their best interest in that. We as a district have tried to expend the dollars from the ESSER funds in each different iteration as that came across in a number of different ways to ensure safety within these school buildings, whether it is running ventilation wide open, it is having folks make sure that these buildings are clean, making sure that we can be in person, because that was the goal that we had at the beginning of the year, was to be in person. And I think that we've done a very remarkably fine job when some schools around us have not been able to. All of that being said, I am in favor of making masks optional, and I'll share why. I spend part of my day job, now that I can travel again, to different parts of the country. And the very first workshop that I did in person for a client was in Chicago last week, 2 weeks ago. And this was the first time most of those employees in that organization had ever seen each other's face. Now, I don't know if that was a good thing, but they certainly seemed surprised about that. And you could have a real human conversation, and this was among adults. And I desperately would like to have the day that the students can see each other face to face, recognize the emotions that are carried within the face, and be able to move on together. I think that any fear that we have of people coming back together, I think that it gives us an opportunity as parents and caregivers to have a conversation in the homes and prepare them for what comes next within the classroom. And Jeff, I think you did a fine job putting this plan together.
Thank you, Kevin. Like all of us, I've been thinking about this day and night. And for me, this has been an exercise in the lesson of being able to feel two things at once. So I am so excited that there's an opportunity for our kids to see each other again, for our staff to see each other again in a different way, and to see teeth that are missing and all those beautiful things, Laura, that you mentioned. I also listened to something a superintendent from another state the other day talking about the first day where masks were optional in their school and how it was a challenge. It was a balance of two things. It was exciting, and he was dealing with a lot of concerns from his staff. It was mentioned tonight that Superintendent Porter and I attended a staff listening session, and I took a lot of notes during that time, and I do still struggle, similar to what Tom said, about how do we support the people that are supporting us when we send our kids to school. And I wanted to read some of the adjectives that were used, because I heard a lot of times that staff wasn't involved in this. And I understand that there's process to everything, but some of the things I heard was angry, excited, proud of the plan, uncomfortable, awkward, expendable, nervous, disregarded. That was just some of the things that were shared, and I think it's important that we don't forget those feelings. Again, this is a balance, just like we have tried to find this entire year. There is not one answer or decision that we've had to make this year that has been easy or that has made everybody happy. And so I'm glad to see, although it's hard to believe some of the data, but I'm glad to see that our county is down to moderate and out of high. I think it is time to make a change. I support the plan. I do want to make note, because there's been a couple of mentions about an emergency plan. We do have the opportunity to call an emergency plan. That can be something that we can do virtually as well. So we do have that in place, and I think that's important for people to hear. And so I just want to encourage our community to support each other. This shouldn't be about, I want to make sure that we're not getting upset that teachers are still wearing masks in their classrooms. That is their choice just as much as it's our choice as parents to send our kids to school without masks. So I really hope that we can keep a positive spin to this. And I want to celebrate this a little bit. There's a little bit of celebration if this is where we end up, while not forgetting about the people that have small children at home that don't have a vaccine available to them, or compromised family members. So I want to say thank you to everybody that has participated. I also really enjoy all the students that are here tonight. If this is something, like, tell us the topics you'll come to, because it's really nice to hear from all of you. So I'll leave it at that. Jennifer?
Well, I'm not used to kind of going after so many people, and everyone has made such great points, I think, up here. Our board has really had a lot of discussion. At our last board meeting, we charged Jeff in coming to this meeting with a plan. We didn't know Maine was going to change their ways. We didn't know the CDC was going to change their ways. We wanted to be out in front of it. And I think the timing has worked in our favor because of what has happened over the last couple of weeks. We've been able to see other districts go mask optional. We've seen other states. I have friends in other states that teach. They've been mask optional for a couple of weeks. Their numbers have not gone up at this point. And they've been able to reap the benefit. I'm supporting going mask optional. I think with that, I think it's a shame that a student survey was sent out today to get their feedback, and that information was not brought forward. It's showing that someone thought it was worthwhile to get their input, but couldn't bring it forth for this meeting. So I think that's unfortunate, and I really think it's unfortunate that we had a staff listening session with, I know there are staff members that are very concerned, and I would hope that there is solutions in working with administration to make sure that we're comfortable as we move forward. I know that we're supplying the right masks for them. I do have concerns with cranking the ventilation, keeping the windows open. I think that's not proven to help either, and we can't make our students uncomfortable and unable to learn in these situations. So I would hope that faculty or the facilities is looking at that and making sure that things are running, but not to extreme measures. I do have a couple questions if we could talk through that. Jeff, what changes will be made on the buses? And if we could talk through that a little bit.
So changes in terms of masking, Jennifer?
There's masking, and also is there any difference in distancing or anything that we've had at this point? So we're essentially going back to 2 years ago.
Yes.
You can ride the bus. Can you ride with a friend? Can you do any of that?
Well, that would be up to Mr. Poulin and the administrators to figure out when the right time is for that. We want to kind of ease into this mask optional first. The only piece would be if a student is coming back day 6 to 10, they do have to wear a mask on the bus, just like they do at school.
And Jeff, what sort of burden are we having with the administrators of people coming back from day 6 to 10 and the separation that we need during lunches or any other process during the day?
It's definitely when that was first implemented, we had a lot of students that was during the period when we were coming out of Omicron, the surge of it. We had a lot of students who were eating elsewhere, and it was just the principals primarily that were covering that. Lately, there have been very few kids. We've had very few. We had 18 cases over the last week, less than 18 cases actually. So we're not having a lot of students in the 6 to 10 range. Some of them are still out. So some of those 18 are not even in the school yet, but we know that they're positive. So it's been fewer kids. It does tie our principals' time up, and they're the ones that feel responsible for covering that. So.
And is there anything that we can do to help that process, or?
Well, I've offered to relieve them on different occasions. I've waited for them to tell me to come over. I'll have snack or lunch or whatever. So, I mean, I think there's ways that we can relieve, and they know that, if they're done with it, we'll certainly help.
Okay. And I think, I'm just kind of looking down through my notes. What sort of process in this plan would the board need to come together to vote on? Just to kind of walk through that. So is there anything sitting still in this plan that we would need to vote to get out of? Or would our coming together to vote only be to go back into kind of stricter terms?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's still stuff in the GGG plan that is pretty routine. It's like the hand washing and everything that we've been doing. All that stuff is still in the plan. The stuff that's been removed is basically all the stuff I showed during the presentation. That will be taken out of the plan. We're waiting for the vote tonight, and then we'll go ahead and remove it. So the only thing that's really left is that final of significance. We're going to continue all the ventilation and all the hand washing and all the stuff that we've been doing for 2 years. Is that state rule for 6 to 10 days and being out for 5 days if you test positive. That's it. If there are conditions that come up, I would consult with the chair and decide, the chair would decide to call an emergency meeting if the regular meeting is too far away, in order for the board to discuss, is there a change that needs to be made?
Could we change the verbiage so we wouldn't have to vote on the 6 to 10? So we would just follow the guidelines of the main CDC?
Yes.
And that,
Yep.
so it wouldn't have that mechanism that we would have to come together to follow it?
Right, and it does say.
Could we just put that in?
Yep, it's actually still in the plan. It says that we follow the CDC, the main CDC and DOE. And right now, we are following the CDC and the MDOE. They've changed everything except for that. That's the only major rule left.
Right. I think I'm not getting my point across, is that you're saying that our time to come together to vote again is to remove that 6 to 10
No, I'm
time
sorry.
frame.
What I was referring to is if there's pandemic conditions that came up and people are wondering, what do we do next? We've got another Omicron or a surge or whatever. I would consult with the chair and see if we need to have a meeting.
Okay. So
I would just say that I would think that another situation would be staffing shortages.
Right.
That we would talk about as well.
But what I'm saying is that we wouldn't have to come together to vote on the 6 to 10 days, the quarantine, or
No.
anything like that, and I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
the way the plan's written, once the CDC discontinues that rule,
Right.
we would discontinue it.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
You ready, Mike?
Yeah, this is going to be easy. Well, first question, the COVID advisory group, I know you said you're not going to have it meet. I actually would ask if you would consider having that group meet in 3 to 6 weeks or so to evaluate how things are going. I feel like it would be, even just a 30-minute Zoom would be a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, I was thinking it was just if something came up, if there's a situation, obviously anytime I'm bringing a recommendation or an update to the board, I've always gone to them to get their input. But, I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea in a few weeks to just get their input.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I also didn't prepare anything. I firmly support this plan, going mask optional. There was a significant amount of eloquence shown today. It's going to be very high odds whether I could meet that, so I'll keep it brief. Just the data and the metrics have changed. Tom mentioned it, folks in the audience mentioned it. We're at a different point today than we were just a few weeks ago, let alone a few months. It's time to make this change, and I feel really comfortable doing it. In my own family, it's been multiple discussions. I have 2 kids, and one of them is masks off immediately, and the other one doesn't know. But that's the way this should work, and so I do sincerely appreciate the concern from Jason and the other teachers. I think it is important to note that peer-reviewed study has showed that one-way masking works even against Omicron, properly used KN95s and N95s, and the notion that and just the prevalence of this virus in the community, it is what it is at this point, and cloth masks aren't going to push back on it. So we've learned that through scientific testing and analysis, and it's just a feather in the cap of science, just continually learning, and so I appreciate that. And so I also wanted to acknowledge the request to start it a little later I don't think it would make much of a difference. I truly don't. And I'm sorry, I know it's disappointing, but yeah, I just don't think that's necessary. Again, you know, this is a mask optional plan, and that's one of the most important things, that word optional. And we need to ensure that we're engendering a culture of differentiation here, that it's okay for different people to choose different paths. It's okay for some people to mask, some people to not mask. And I hope every one of us can go back and talk to our kids and our friends, and we'll talk to everybody in school and say, you should not be commenting on your friends or other kids or students or teachers or staff or anybody, whether they have a mask on or not. At this point, we're moving forward and allow people to choose the method that they choose. And the only other thing I would note is that just looking at what we're doing and what we're not doing anymore in the plan, the public health strategies that we're continuing to do, ventilation, the cleaning, that's all really good, and I hope we can continue, you know, in future years, so maybe we can battle against like flu and these other horrible stomach viruses and things like that to just knock those down a notch. So just a note just popped into my head that we should probably keep doing that.
Well, that is a good, actually, I'll just respond for 1 second. That is actually a good point, because I was thinking that the other day as well, that during the winter months, when we know the cold and the flu is at its worst, if we can, you know, crank the ventilation system up to 100%, which we don't do that on a normal year, but it might make a difference. It's something worth trying.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. The only other thing is, you have a very eloquent family.
I prepared a ton of comments, and then my wife came home and said, "Don't say that, don't say that, don't say that." I mean, most people here know how I feel. I've pushed these folks on this stage harder than I should have the last few months. I'm in favor of mask optional. I do have a few comments, but maybe before we get there, Jeff, what ideally would you like to see from us here tonight? I think this is a good document. It's very well thought out, and I think it should continue because the Q&A format is a good one. But I guess my question would be, what is the minimum we could do to not create confusion and manage things best going forward? Along the lines of what Jennifer was saying, I think she's saying that by default, if the CDC rule and the SOP changes, that we would automatically adopt that, and I see you do have follow current CDC rules. I guess this document is starting from a point of we had all these restrictions and then we're taking them all away, and is that the best way to do it as we vote on this, or could we look at it from the viewpoint of you know, starting from February 2020, what's different from that point, and one being the SOP in the 6 to 10 days and the 0 to 5 days. You had a slide in your presentation that was the layered preventative mitigation strategies, and the left column was continue and the right column was stop. So I guess what is the easiest, simplest way? If we just remove masks and acknowledge the SOP, does that satisfy what we want to do here tonight?
So you're actually voting tonight because you have a plan already. You've had a plan since August or July. Actually, it was before the school year even started. You've had a plan, so basically you're amending your plan. So, and that once you take that vote tonight, we'll be going through that plan and striking everything that doesn't apply anymore. So all these things will be removed from the plan. So I think, you know, like to Jennifer's point, if you're continuing to follow the CDC, if that's what the plan says, I think there's some question mark from last month in February, whether or not that was going to be something that the board wanted to continue or not, depending on whether it was a recommendation, and if the board would follow a recommendation or not. You know, it was unclear. So I think it was written one way. Now I'd go back to the plan based on the vote tonight and go ahead and amend the plan with everything that's changed. I think that's probably the cleanest way to do it, is just to take everything you're voting on tonight and apply it to the plan, because you're really amending the GGG plan tonight.
And what's the difference between removing that and putting the SOP language in there that supports the 6 to 10 day thing? I mean, what else is different?
There isn't anything else different. That's really it, and that's already in your plan because we have to follow the CDC. So, I mean, it's all the other mitigation stuff that we've been doing, and it's all in there, the hand washing, the cleaning, the ventilation, and there's more details on all that stuff. But that's stuff that we've been doing for 2 years anyway, and we're just continuing.
So continue daily screening, continue pulled testing, out 5 days if positive, 6 to 10 days, mask continues, distancing when eating, cleaning, sanitation, buy an X now, tracking vaccination rates, and weekly reporting.
Right, and I went through the plan to make sure that had covered everything. Okay. That's all of it.
So you would rather that we adopt this whole plan rather than just saying removing the entire GGG plan and just adopting the SOP?
Well, can I just interrupt for a second? Would it be helpful?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or just, I think that the plan that we've been working off of since August is for our school. And it's the way that we are interpreting and using and applying the SOP. And so I think the SOP is always going to be there, but it's important, and we've always asked, to have a plan to interpret and apply the SOP. And so I think that's what the GGG plan does. And probably there will be a point at which we don't need this plan anymore, right? And we can say, going forward, as we have, we will continue to follow.
I was waiting for this vote. I'll have it all edited out based on what I think you're taking a vote on tonight, obviously with the masking and everything else gone, if that's the case, and then submit it to you as a draft, and then the board can decide what you want to do with the plan at that point.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So there are a couple of lines here that I wanted some clarification on. What is the status of cafeterias in a mask optional environment? And it'll go back to a typical year unless there is a compelling reason otherwise. So what sort of thing can you imagine?
Staff shortage.
Staff
so
shortage.
Two of our cafeterias have been open. Of course, we have 2 schools using the middle school, so that's like a continuous use. But we've been typical in the high school and the middle school at this point. Mabel I. Wilson School has been a challenge with staffing. We've had staff shortages. We don't have enough staff. We've had staff covering classrooms, and so they're not available for lunch. The administrators are often the ones covering lunch, and when they can't do it, then the cafeteria is closed. However, having said that, the Mabel I. Wilson administration has come up with a new, more typical plan that you would see in a typical year, and they think that they can make it fly. So I think, I've had conversations with them, and they're ready to try to get that cafeteria back to a typical status soon.
Okay, that makes sense. I was concerned that that was a avenue that we would start distancing kids again, and
no, only if they're back in days 6 to 10.
Okay. All right, same sort of question with the large assemblies and indoor events at the GCA and athletic events. There's 2 different areas here where it says, will mask be required in large events, and no, mask optional at school assemblies and large indoor events, but administrators should use discretion when scheduling to reduce the number of people in a space. So I kind of see that. I mean, it makes sense to me, like stagger things instead of filling up the auditorium, but I mean, that could create, one building does it this way and another building does it that way. I see that as kind of like a can of worms. Do we need that line in there for each of those things?
I do. I want to leave it at the discretion of the administrator because, for example, at Mabel I. Wilson School, the administrators they used to have assemblies with all the kids. It's great, but there's 720 students at that school, and to put them in that gym, probably at the discretion of the administrator, may not be a good idea. And they may want to do grade levels or smaller groups if they chose to do assemblies. The high school, it might be a different situation. It really depends. It's really leaving it to the administrator to make those decisions.
Okay. So just general comments. Obviously, I support the mask optional plan unless the next variant is dramatically different, but I can't see that changing. I do feel for the teachers. I've read all the emails, difficult emails, and I understand that the teachers, it's going to be a tough change, and I hope that they hang in there. I really do, that we get over this hump and do it together. I do think that one KN95 mask is better than 2 cloth masks, and I hope that they continue to, that helps them a bit. I don't take this decision lightly, but in the end, all the factors considered, I can't go with anything except for choice is the only thing that seems fair to me. And I've heard in emails and comments from people that they kind of think that taking the masks off is reckless, and I personally feel, after all things considered, is that it's affecting our kids. I think the opposite. I think it is reckless not to take them off, and in the end, the thing that I come back to is I have to put the kids at the top of the list, and I'm sorry how that sounds to some of the teachers, but I feel that the effect on the kids outweighs the small risk to the adults. I think that's the only thing I have to say.
Well, being at the end of the line, everything has been said for the most part. And my computer just died, and I did have a prepared speech, so I'm going to do the best that I can on the fly. I have struggled with this for weeks, for days, about mask optional, because I'm really concerned about staff shortages. And with that, what are we going to do? Do we have substitutes ready? Do we have volunteers? Like, how is that going to work? Because I would hate to see mask optional and then in 2 weeks we're all remote again.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think we're in the same boat as most districts, that we have a shortage of substitutes. We are fortunate that the board has supported this year 7 of the long-term bench substitutes is what we call them, subs that are with us every day. We pay them a little bit more, and they're here every day for us, permanent substitutes. Those have been an amazing resource this year. I don't know if we could have done it without these 7 very capable people. We also have 3 lunch and recess aides. That has taken a lot of stress off of the lunch and recess time, having those extra pair of hands. But in all honesty, I mean, we've been able to manage. I think we only had 1 day this year where we were in red, and I can't remember. It was some sort of a staff shortage situation. I think it was a combination with bus drivers and other staff, and we had experienced high levels of staff shortage. I mean, I will never say it's not possible. It's always possible. I suppose it's possible in a typical year not to have enough folks as well, but I worry about that. That is probably my first worry, right? My only big, huge worry right now is, can we do this, and are our staff going to get, ill? Are they not going to be here?
And the next question, if you can talk a little bit more about volunteers.
This is an idea we haven't acted on, but we have on the backside. We've actually put out some messages and newsletters earlier this year, before Omicron, and asked people to renew because it's been 2 years, to renew their background check if they were interested in volunteering. So we did have a number of parents that came forward and have completed their updated the paperwork, or completed it if they never did, and are on a list for volunteers. So I have a discussion that we'll have on the agenda with the administrative team next week to talk about. Actually, it's tomorrow. I'm thinking it's Friday for some reason. Tomorrow, to talk about the potential use of volunteers to come in and do some duty coverage, recess and lunch. That's where we get really in trouble with not having enough people. A lot of our ed techs have been covering classrooms this year because we don't have enough substitutes when teachers are out. So our first very reliable and capable ed techs are the ones we ask to go into the classroom And they're in there a lot. This has been a very unusual year, obviously, for that.
Yep.
And then we don't have enough people to do lunch and recess coverage because a lot of our ed techs spend a little bit of their day doing that as well. Some of them spend more than a little bit of their day. So we just are short. So that would be an area where I think volunteers would be extremely helpful to help out with those kinds of activities in our schools.
Okay, and another question, this is more for Scott. Our bus driver pool, the bus drivers are now going to be more exposed to those children. Yes, there's better ventilation on those buses, but how is that looking?
It's, well, as I mentioned, we had our bus driver class, and we've now got people who are going for their road test at this time. We just hired 2 bus drivers over the weekend.
Okay.
And, we continue to hire, so we've got 3 that are ready to take their road test, so.
Great. I think overall, this plan looks sound, and all the uncoupling with the quarantining has satisfied my worries, and I have no problem with going optional.
I feel a lot of pressure being on the end tonight. I want to thank everyone here and at home who are anxiously waiting for us to get to a vote. There are a few things that I do want to say first. I think it is really important for us to remember that MSAD 51 is a public institution. We are here to be open for everyone, including community members. And it is our duty to make sure that we are looking out for those who aren't old enough to be vaccinated, who have any vulnerable health concerns, or can't wear a mask for various reasons. And I don't want anyone to feel disposable, because we can't throw out any of our students or any of our staff, and that's just not fair. We're not a private school. We're not a private business. We are a public institution, and that makes us different and something that we really need to keep in mind. Again, I want to thank everyone for their input, especially our students. It's been really great to hear everyone's perspective, and I appreciate that, because this is not an easy decision, again, for the reasons personally that I put forward earlier, that we are considering everyone. So thank you. Thank you to everyone for your input and patience and expertise and feedback. And I would like to vote.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for discussion. Thanks for preparing. Thanks for being respectful and empathetic
Tyler,
to others.
can I just
Yes.
say one quick thing, is that I don't think people realize the amount of time and effort that's been put into this plan, bringing it to this date. There's been, the board and Jeff and Tyler have put in endless hours on the weekends and each day discussing it. And it may not look that way because of just what has changed in the world view or in the main view. So I just want to thank everyone for that sits up here.
Yeah, and I should have said that too. I want to thank the board for their input as well as this plan was being developed. The leadership team, the association leadership, the nurses, and the COVID advisory group. All those groups contributed to this plan as it was being developed. So I want to just thank everyone for their thoughts in helping this plan become effective.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that, and Jeff. Okay. I believe we are ready for a vote. All in favor?
Well,
Or no?
the motion on the table, though, was not to adopt the plan. It was just to remove masks.
No, the motion is to approve the mask optional plan as presented by the superintendent.
Jason's right, though. The motion that was made didn't represent
Oh, I'm
that. So
sorry.
if you'd
Okay.
entertain another one, I bet Jason
So
would.
I will amend my motion to read to adopt the mask optional plan as presented by the superintendent, with the only modification be to make it immediate.
And I'll re-second.
Okay.
vote on the amendment.
Does anyone have any, any discussion on the amended motion, which is making it immediate between now and tomorrow morning at 7:15?
It means that we can have the rest of this meeting without this on.
Yeah, I get
So
it.
I
I
am
get it.
for it. And all of you people. So, thank you.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. Okay, so we have a second. Any other further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
That was to approve the amendment.
Okay.
And now,
Do we have a motion to?
no, just
What?
vote on the.
Okay, you want to do it again?
Yep, you have to. Yep, that was to approve the amendment. Now we're voting on the amended motion.
Okay, so do we have a motion for the,
No, we have it. Just ask for the vote.
okay, all in favor? All in favor? Thanks. Jason, you make things so complicated. He keeps us honest.
All right, can I take
Can we take a bathroom break?
This feels very nice, I will say that.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Whew. All right.
Technicality.
Second is voted on.
Tyler, maybe give it a moment to clear the vote.
Except for the turf field.
Sure, so we're going to, if everybody would like to stay for the next presentation, you're more than welcome to. But we will just give a minute for those that need to leave, and then we'll get ready for our next presentation.
I actually have one.
Do you know what I mean? Just for
I was going to
for
do it.
parents.
Yeah, I was going to do it right after this meeting. I wasn't going to do it in the morning. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I may not get it done right now, but I will be doing it. It's going out tonight.
All of them got to for all the family members, all the group chats, that it was unanimous.
I'll get them now. Only 5 people are speaking.
Only 5.
And they can you raise them? They're just so patient.
Yes.
They've been like
Yeah, yeah,
waiting and waiting and waiting. They're really just want to go.
Okay. All right, so I know that there's been a lot of other people here this evening that have been super patient about our next presentation, which is on a turf field. The next few months for the board is going to be very busy. We have budget coming up. We have a new school project. We will continue to navigate COVID, so I appreciate everybody's patience because we will continue to have full agendas. So thank you for those that have been waiting, especially to all the students that are here tonight. So I would like to welcome a presentation from our athletics director, David Shapiro. Sure, we can clap. Let's clap.
Can't hear.
Grab that mic, please.
Could you bring the mic closer to you so we can hear you? Nope.
I don't know if it's on, to be completely honest.
It died.
No, we can't hear you.
Cujo?
Generally, I don't need a mic, but I guess for people to hear at home, they're going to need it.
There you go. Now it's working.
Are we good? Yep. Ooh, there we go. So first of all, thanks for having us here. I'm back again tonight regarding our turf field project. Eliza Miller and I presented this to the board last May. That was all virtual, and obviously we have some new board members here, and those that are in TV land will get this for the first time, some of them. So thank you for having us here. We're here to talk about how the board will consider this as part of their scope for the upcoming referendum. So tonight we're here with coaches, community members, and students in support of our turf field facility. I'm going to go through a slideshow that we did present in May, and this is again to update folks on some and expand on a few points that we had earlier. And this, I think it's important to note, this is not a new project. A brief history here: 17 years ago, the community first initiated the prospect of having a turf field here on campus. Clearly, that didn't pan out. And then again, most recently, 6 years ago, we had a turf exploratory committee that was formed with a number of people, a cross-section of our community, to determine whether or not we'd be able to privately fundraise to install a turf facility here. That too clearly didn't work out. What we learned from that is that the community really wanted the school district to get behind this if this were to go forward. And at that point, the facilities folks in the board adopted this as part of the strategic plan. So again, not a new program, not a new ask. This is part of our strategic plan already, again, for those that are listening for the first time out in TV land and for new board members. And again, we are going to have some of our coaches expound on a few pieces of this presentation that we have here. And again, thank you all for your patience here. Clearly, you all have a lot on your plates right now. We're hoping this is an exciting opportunity for us as we go forward. I can tell you there's a lot of energy about this right now from the folks that I have been able to be in touch with. So without further ado, here we go. So here's a picture of Glenn Hutchins Field right now, also affectionately known as the Grass Museum. It looks beautiful, but don't touch it. So we get very little use out of it overall. You'll see on there that we get 162 hours. Those are the teams that are using it currently. And this past year, we were actually able to reinstate football on our field, and we had a couple of games there. We have just about every sport in the book. The only thing we don't have here is wrestling. So all of our teams are practicing. Our participation level of the school is outstanding, both at the high school and the middle school. And we've simply run out of space to do what we want to do. You notice the teams that practice here on site, there are very few. The teams that practice off-site are almost the entirety of our athletics programs. Some of them are Twinbrook, which we all know is a wonderful facility. We are really blessed to have what we have at Twinbrook, and our boys lacrosse team practices at Sharps Field. Parenthetically, I have it here that our middle school teams that do practice on site, for instance, our middle school soccer team, they practice on the outfield of the baseball team on a U12 field. So with U12 goals. So we're not really meeting all the needs of our kids. This is a proposed where it would go on the current game field, the Glenn A. Hutchins Field. We would hope that that's where we would place this. There's a number of things that we would consider to be benefits. First and foremost, that's intentional. On the top of the list here is physical education. Our fields are not used throughout the course of the day, and this is a piece of our property as we've consolidated our campus here that could be used every single day. Even with snow on it for that matter, but every single day our physical education programs would benefit. We could have practices daily on our facility. Again, you notice the 23 plus teams that have to go elsewhere to practice, they'd all be able to stay here on campus. Also for games, soccer, field hockey, football, and lacrosse would all get to play there. And the next line I have in there is equity among programs for usage. Currently, I know that's a loaded word, but our field hockey coach, I think, is still here right now. They have a dedicated field, and that's wonderful, but they can't play under the lights ever because we can't do that on our field right there. And so the other fall teams, they get to play night games. Mom and dad can come. It's at 6 o'clock at night, whereas the field hockey team, they're relegated to having to play a 3:30 start so that we can have officials and we can get it in during daylight. So there's an equity piece among all of our programs there. I mentioned the ease of traffic on campus. That, again, it's that rush to get to Twinbrook and everywhere else that we have to go. We won't have to do that. Our students will be able to stay right here on campus for the most part. I note that it's a reliable and consistent and safe playing surface for all seasons, and that's something that, our grass field doesn't offer us right now. Even with the minimal use that we have, it gets torn up pretty quickly, and Mother Nature also doesn't help us. The next item I have on here is 94% of our student athletes surveyed wanted a turf field. So a little snippet about that particular thing, and then I'm going to hand off to Daphne, who will speak our student voice. That's one thing we heard quite a bit tonight, and I'm really encouraged that we do listen to what our students need. And so this is a week ago Wednesday. I said, okay, we really need to hear from our students. So I sent out a survey, 9 o'clock at night. By 9:15, I had 80 responses. There were 3 questions. Do you want a turf field? What would you use it for? And those were required. And the third one was open-ended. Please tell me your thoughts on this. So at that point, within the first 15 minutes, there was no forewarning that this was going out. The energy was really palpable. There were 50 of them that actually took the time to write something to us about what their thoughts were about that. And so on that note, Daphne, I'm going to let you speak here about our students' perspective on this.
So hi, my name is Daphne Campo. I'm a junior at Greeley High School, and I'm one of the captains of the field hockey team, as well as a member of the lacrosse team. I've been at Greeley for 3 years, and I've been playing sports for all 3 of those years, and every year that I've talked to my fellow student athletes about this, they voiced their support for the turf field. Personally, I believe that Greeley should install the turf field because of the way that the surface changes the sport being played on it, and how attempting to transfer our skills formed on a grass field to a turf field can often lead to a disadvantage. In this case, for field hockey, the game played on a turf field is very different compared to the game played on a grass field because the ball moves so much faster. In fact, many field hockey stick companies make completely separate sticks depending on whether they're going to be used on a grass field or a turf field. Furthermore, I have experienced many injuries relating to grass fields. I've sprained my ankles at least 8 times because of divots in the ground. This can be especially dangerous in sports like soccer or lacrosse, which require fast twitch movements. And the consistency of a turf field would lessen the chances of injury for many players. Another problem I've experienced when playing on a grass field is that practice is largely dependent on the weather. There have been weeks in my lacrosse career where we have gone at least 4 days without a practice, and then we have a game without actually preparing for it. And it is a disadvantage for us. Having a turf field would allow for sports to practice in rain or shine and would improve skills overall. Lastly, as normalcy slowly returns to school and school-related activities, the opportunity to practice and play as a team and in a team sport is becoming more and more appreciated. Having been confined to our homes, many student athletes and students in general, like those in gym class, have been eager to return to sports. A turf field would be a terrific addition to Greeley's campus and would allow for individuals to appreciate exercise in all ways. Thank you.
Well done. The last bullet on this one mentions the community use that we would be able to have that we currently aren't able to utilize right here on campus. And so along with that is a kind of a visual representation. Here's our current usage of May. It's simply game days, and that's it. And when you notice the other, and I'll go over what some of the little bullets are in there, you know, the green is practice, the red are games, and the blue would indicate community use. At this point, there's really no community use. It's really just games. So there's a significant increase in the amount of playability we would have here on campus, in the hub of our community. Again, another visual representation of what September would look like. That's all pretty straightforward. And I can share this with you after the fact, too, so if you wanted to be mindful of what some of these bullets are. And then here's just a little explanation of what those are. You notice, you know, right now, 162 hours is what we use the field for. Maybe we should bump that by 4 hours for the couple of games that we had here for football. But the rest of it, you can look on the right-hand column here. The potential use that we would have for this field would increase tenfold. And that's including physical education. I only noted the fall and the spring times, and certainly, winter as well. You don't have to worry about compaction. We don't even let our cross-country ski team go out on there, which is a nice flat area for them to train, but we can't because we have to worry about compaction with the ice with the current grass field right now. So you can see very clearly that there's a need, and it would be utilized, throughout our school year. And then here's a list of our competitors that do have a turf facility. Daphne mentioned, we are at a disadvantage against some of our peers. They can practice and they can play when we can't. In the preseason, I think this year in particular, this season in particular, is more of a challenge for us. I dropped my kids at school the other day. Their turf field is clear. They're out there playing lacrosse right now, whereas we can't do that. So we're a month behind all of our competitors, and almost all of these on here are our competitors. Here's a question I'm sure that it would resonate with some folks. What is the cost of this? And we have roughly $14 a square foot. We have 114,000 square feet out there. The number you see associated with this includes the geotechnical testing and reports, the surveys we got to do, a project schedule. This is all architects' stuff. as well as upgrades to the facility. And those would include bathrooms and lights and stands, areas for the boosters and the contingency fund that has to be part of a project of this nature. And then this is my final page right here, just so you know, and I have a few other things to just summarize where we are. We would like to maximize the usage of our field space in our community, and having a turf field would allow that. All the Maine Principals Association championship games and many of the regional games are played on turf. That's in particular for field hockey, football, soccer, and lacrosse. They're all turf. And the last one of the bullets here that I would like Coach Kelker to speak to is about the opportunity cost, about how this impacts our kids by having to go elsewhere. The floor is yours.
Hi there. Thanks for giving us this time to present tonight, especially with all the time that you guys have put in over the last couple of years. So really appreciate it. I'm Becca Kelker. I'm the varsity coach for girls lacrosse here at Greeley. It's my 10th year. I'm also a Greeley grad and a Cumberland resident. I have 3 young kids as well, and I taught at the middle school for 10 years here. So I know the history of the schools and the athletics as well, and the usage of the field. So I'm hoping that tonight my comments can help you understand the challenges that the spring teams face being on grass. So for spring teams and athletes, weather and field conditions are always an obstacle to work around. We start our season in late March when this ground is covered with snow and really wet. So the gym is not an option because we're not allowed in there with lacrosse equipment. The parking lots we've tried, but because of the sand left over from the winter, our kids fall and get injured. So we don't have a space on campus to practice until that snow is cleared off, which means that we have to rent indoor turf off-site in Portland or in Topsom, which is what we've done a couple of years. And we spend the first 2, sometimes 3 weeks of our 12-week season indoors. On average, since I've coached here, which is about 10 years, 30% of our regular season practices have either been off campus at an indoor site or rented from neighboring schools. To prepare for playoffs, again, we have to find turf. As David mentioned, that the championships are always on turfs. So we want to get in some turf practices before that game. This places a burden on our families in many ways. Our program must dedicate school off-site practices requiring transportation to and from. Our program must dedicate about a third of what we fundraise to paying for turf rentals. And then it's a burden on our families for transporting kids to and from after school. Which is really hard on working family parents who have to take time away from their jobs to get their kids to and from practices. Another aspect is to consider is the competitive disadvantage of time. Because we're limited to the turf in southern Maine is really limited. We have an hour of practice time, whereas other teams that have turf at their schools have 2 hours plus. And so they end up having twice as much practice time in those first 2 or 3 weeks. Once we get outside, on average about a month into our season, of our 2.5-month season, we have limited options. So Twin Brooks, as David mentioned, is such a beautiful space, but in the spring it's really wet and the fields aren't playable and it closes a lot. Sharps, where the boys is, in my opinion, is not a safe surface for our athletes to play on. We've had injuries there as well. So what we've decided to do is we practice on the lower field out behind the middle school, which presents its own challenges in that it's not a full-size field, and it's hard to fit our teams on there. However, we just decided that this was the best option because of the lowered risk of injury and also less of a burden on our families as far as transportation-wise. They don't have to worry about getting their kids to practice. Because of weather and snow, 63% of our practices over the last 5 years have been on a field without lines, which is like asking basketball to play on a court that doesn't have a foul line, a three-point line, or boundary lines. Also, because we don't have access to our varsity field, we have no home field game advantage. So in the last 10 years since I've been coaching, 66% of our games have been off-site at other schools, and that should be 50-50. We usually end up with about, I think I calculated 4.5 games on average that we get to play at home for our season. Our games are often moved to neighboring turf fields because of this issue, so we've played at NYA frequently. And we've averaged less than 20 hours total per season over the course of, I think, my tenure here, whereas our opponents usually spend about 100 hours on their field over the course of a season. So they're getting about 5 times as much practice and game time on their fields as we do here. Of the 12 opponents we play, as David mentioned, only 2 don't have turf or are not planning to get turf at this time. So I hope that some of this can help you get some insight as to the challenges that we face from the lacrosse community. A turf field would greatly alleviate some of these challenges and burdens and provide more opportunities for our teams to spend time playing and less time getting to and from practices. And that it could really become a resource to the community and not just to lacrosse teams as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Coach. And I'm going to have Coach Andresen come up, if he would. One of our elder statesmen here is instrumental in helping us get the field named in honor of Glenn Hutchins, and talk a little bit about your perspective, please.
Hi. And like you, I get to go last. So, yeah, so and I'm not going to be looking at anything. It's all going to come from here. Pete, help me if there's if I miss anything. Glenn Hutchins, he still is in the community. Glenn lives still on Crestwood Avenue, and I played for Coach Hutchins. I moved to Cumberland in 1972, and I've been here with a little bit of schooling out of state, but generally we've been in that whole time. I remember getting the field the way it is. Well, not the way it is, the way it was. Coach Hutchins actually got the old bleachers, and these old metal bleachers that some manufacturing place was throwing away. He got them in. He had the high school players doing it. We broke every child labor law going, but we got those done. He got old utility poles, the very first ones for the field. And so we were one of the first, along with Gorham High School and Scarborough High School, with kind of Bon Eagle as well, were the first ones to really have lights. And so he did it to really make our program, the boys soccer program, because we didn't have girls soccer at that time, because again, I'm older than dinosaurs, to give us whatever advantage we could to have the program really on tops. Fast forward 45 years. That competitive advantage that I think we had, I think right now we really are at a competitive disadvantage. And like Becca said, when we play big games, when we play Western Maine, or now Southern Maine finals, they're on turf. We're playing opponents. A lot of times it's Cape Elizabeth in various sports. It's Yarmouth, it's Falmouth, all of which have turf. And so for them, when we're playing them in larger games, it's like a home game to them. In fact, just this year, my soccer team lost a home game on turf because our field was not playable. And we had to play Freeport High School over at Falmouth. And Freeport plays at turf. And going over to Falmouth, we felt it was like an away game. Excuse me. So looking at that, I think it's really important for us. And kids like competition. Kids want to feel like they could be. These young ladies earlier, they're not here now, they were good. They were real good. Competition drives them. Competition drives these kids up here and whatever folks are left here. I think it's important that we make it so that our kids have at least the same level playing field. I was looking back at my notes, and the last year that my high school team lost on a natural grass field was 2006. 16 years ago is the last time. Every year that we haven't won, we've lost, has been on artificial turf. By giving us an artificial turf, and I know field hockey, I know lacrosse, and I know football, it's the same thing like we said earlier. The big games, the championship games are played on turf. Please, please give us a chance to play on a level playing field. Thank you, folks.
Thanks again, coaches. and Daphne for being here to help present. And I just want to finish up by saying, again, this is part of our strategic plan, and we hope we can carry this forward. We want to be able to carry this forward as part of the new school referendum. And there is a palpable energy and excitement about this project right now, and we feel now is the time to make this happen. So again, thank you for hearing us here. Thank you folks for hanging out. Kudos to you. It was a long night for you. It's a long night for you all as well. Certainly, we have any questions you have, we're happy to answer. And if there's another time for a public comment or whatever, we can join you back if you have any further questions. So that ends my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think it's important for everyone to understand that we are not voting on this tonight.
Correct.
So this is kind of information for the board and for the community to digest and to ask questions. And then, do you know your... Okay. I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a process behind this. So this just isn't a yes or no tonight. And I also want to say it's really cool to see all the Greeley gear. This is like the most Greeley gear I've ever seen in this room, so it's pretty cool. So I don't know if we want to open it up to questions. I know there probably are a few on the board. So you want to start again, Avery?
Yeah.
All right.
I guess my first question is what kind of environmental impact this would have?
That's a great question. And so we have done a lot of research on this, and Eliza, you can correct me, because we've, like I said, this is going back 17 years. So long story short, there's nothing that's a negative environmental impact. I mean, one of the things you could say, it is a positive environmental impact. We don't need to water it. We don't need to put any pesticides down.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. I guess my next question is, I've heard like a lot of hours and numbers surrounding that being thrown out, but what % of games and practices have to be deferred / canceled because of not having a turf field?
I don't have the particular percentages, but I would certainly go by what, Becca and Coach have said too, that what we had. So if they're getting 50 hours and we're getting 20 hours, I mean, that's a differential that we have right there between what we can do in the spring season in particular and what our opponents are able to do. I don't know if you've read the book, The Talent Code, but that speaks to, the 10,000 hours to become, proficient in your craft. And we end up falling well short of what those hours of deep practice are because of our lack of facilities. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And my computer just died, so that's it.
It seems like a common theme.
Yeah.
That's a long night then.
Madison?
Alrighty, I have 3 questions. One thing I just didn't really understand was how replacing a current field will increase playtime. If we're already not using some of the fields enough and overusing others, why would we waste the money before people start using them more, before we know that they're going to get used more?
I'm sorry, ask me that again, I'm not sure.
Basically, what is going to increase, why is it going to increase the playtime? If we're already not using it enough, how is this going to increase the playtime?
Okay, so we don't use it because we have to keep it pristine as possible, and we use it for games only. So the increase in the amount of time and the usage we would have is we can not only use it for games, but we'll use it for practice. And I could have a practice for 2 hours, and the turnover to be able to get a facility ready like that is there's no turnover. The next team walks on out and plays. So we can have practices, we can have games, and we can also have community use for that. Yeah. So it's an area that is just underutilized altogether. Yeah.
Alrighty, that answers that question. My second question is, would it be cheaper to put some money into the care of the current fields, like laying down sand to even out the fields and prevent the divots?
No.
Okay.
You asked if it would be cheaper. Yes, it would be far less expensive to do that, but it wouldn't be that would not be a good bang for our buck.
Okay.
We would still not get the usage.
That makes sense.
Good question.
If this were to be negated by the board, I was just wondering, in order to make our students more prepared for turf fields at other schools, would it be possible to do once or twice a week practices until we were to either get that turf field, or if we don't get it at all, to do once or twice a week practices to prepare students for those turf tournaments?
You mean to get on a turf field once or twice a week to do so?
Yes, like going on to Yarmouth or Falmouth if they were to allow
They're
it.
using their fields. It's rare that we can find the indoor time that we get is down on Riverside. So that's not a school facility, and so we're in there we get out late some nights because of the availability of that even. So that's really not an option for us, unfortunately. We have a very collegial group that I work with among our other athletic directors and coaches, and they do squeeze in some time for us when it comes to playoff times.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, they're not in favor of helping us out in some fashion when it comes to playoffs.
Understandable.
Good question. Yeah.
Alrighty, that's all I have.
Thank you. Tom, do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, I do have one question. I'm sorry I had to step out for a moment. So it has to do with freeing up capacity. So it's pretty clear that the addition of the turf field would free up capacity for some of the other fields. But I'm wondering about freeing up capacity in the gyms just by adding this. I had a conversation last week with a different Pete Bingham about trying to extend our basketball season so the 5th and 6th graders that I coach can keep playing. But he told me that the middle school gym and the high school gym are just booked up because of the teams that need to be practicing indoors there. Would you see some capacity being freed up there just by adding the turf field?
Absolutely. We'd be outside much sooner. So that would free up gym time. Yep.
Okay.
I didn't even consider that. That's great. That's another great point. I should have put that in there.
Peter?
I have none at this time.
Nothing? Kevin?
I can always count on you. Yeah, thanks. It is good to see this again.
Yes.
So I do have questions, but the first piece, Daphne's comment about safety is absolutely essential. You don't want to step in a hole on any field. But here's a question: is there an economy of scale if you were to look at turfing the field hockey field as well?
There may very well be, and I think that's when we would have to, with the facility committee, that is something we've met as a group of coaches and booster groups, and candidly, that's something that was thrown out there. Maybe we should do too. Yep.
Well, I think you definitely may want to look at that, but that leads to, of course, my leading question, which is the average life expectancy of a turf field.
Great question. So I had the opportunity to work at a school that did have a turf field, and at that time, that was many, many years ago, it was an 8-year warranty. That field lasted 19 years. So an 8-year warranty lasted 19 years before they had to replace it. Now they come with a 12-year warranty. And so industry standard is probably staying anywhere from 25 to 30 years before you would need to replace it.
Okay. So where my head was going on that, I mean, look, all of us have bought a rug for 8 years and kept it for 19. So, but when we talk about the possibility of incorporating this into a bonding event, my fear is always that if a field is expected to last for a decade and we're financing something for 20 years, that's not always great. And Scott, you can always jump in with a better knowledge of numbers. But so I don't know if that becomes something outside of anything else that we're doing. It just, one of those things that jumps out at me is understanding both how long we're going to do that for and how much what the expectation is. Can I make that sound better?
I could add something to that. One of the things when you have a turf field or you have an AFSAT like that, you create a capital account. So you create a fund which is outside the general fund for a replacement fund, and each year you put money into that fund so that when you get to the end of the useful life of the field, you have funds to replace it. So it's an ongoing replacement. As far as bonding, we can work the bonding, whether it's 20 years or 10 years, we can create that. It doesn't necessarily have to be one bond for 20 years.
Isolate that piece.
We could isolate that, I believe. Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
The one question I have is back to the cost and what that cost included. And there was something that mentioned that the facility would be updated as well. So can you talk a little bit more about what that includes?
We have a pretty long wish list of things that we would like to do for facility improvements right out there. We don't really have any storage. The booster facility is inadequate. We have no bathrooms. Our stands, testament to these folks over here, are packed. for our games. And we could use an expansion of that. You notice that there's a handicap access to that facility that is not even really accessible. So, there's another way to how might we rework that to make our facility more accessible. There's an upgrade of the lights included in that. So, and as well as the contingency fund that is associated with a building project of this nature. And we haven't drilled down into the weeds to get an exact cost of 2 or 3 bathrooms, but gave us a good ballpark for that.
Would you anticipate doing something with a weight room in a facility like that?
We would love to, absolutely. Yep.
Just checking.
Yep.
Got people in my line of sight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just was curious about that because we've talked about that in facilities and
Yes.
long-term
Yeah.
planning, and I'm kind of curious how that all plays into each other. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Want me to go? Since my kids just left, now I can speak. So, anyways, thank you, David, for doing this presentation. It really feels like, I'm probably going to have the same questions as I did last May when we went through this. I guess I have maybe 4. One being the 2.5. I didn't get a chance. I meant to go back through my notes from our last meeting that you presented at. Is that a current number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what you're saying is that's for the turf to lay it on the ground, not with the improvements that you just
No,
spoke
that
to?
includes the other improvements.
Okay.
Yes.
With that field that we're talking about has issues with the lights, is my understanding. I'm not really an expert on this, but my understanding is that field hockey, lacrosse could not play on that field under those lights.
Under the current lights.
Under the current lights.
And so very specifically, they are rated, and they were bought, and Coach would know better than 98. And I had the Musco Lighting Company came out. They're the ones who installed them, and they did an assessment of what we have. So they're rated at 30-foot candles. In order to play what we call quote-unquote small ball, which would be lacrosse and field hockey on that at night, you need to be a minimum of 50-foot candles. So this includes upgrading those to 50-foot candles.
Okay, so that's in the 2.5?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Good. And we don't really need to get into it now, but I think I think the facilities should look at what the cost would be to our annual budget. Currently, we're going through the budget process for next year. We're having major shortfalls, and we need to approach this in a way that we're mindful and knowing what the upkeep costs are for a turf field and how they would compare to the current facilities. So I'm just putting that out there. So if you're able to kind of help the facilities look at those costs as we move forward with that, I think that would be very helpful.
I can already give you a ballpark on that. So roughly, I don't know if Coach Story's still here, taking care of fields, a field of that nature, what it needs between fertilization and water, et cetera, you plan on about $8,000 to $10,000 a year for each field. So you consider the field hockey field, the game field, et cetera. So that's a cost savings right there that we would not have, as well as the labor associated with it. The maintenance of a turf field is minimal at best.
Okay,
Yep.
good to know.
Yep.
And then my last question is, I know that we have on that field a fair amount of complaints from the surrounding houses. I know that we were going to have a football game with an announcer. We were told we couldn't have an announcer because of the noise. Is that if we invest money in this field more than where it stands right now, are we going to have issues with the surrounding neighborhoods and noise complaints with, having things being held there and having that excessive, or not excessive, I don't mean that, and having all of that use? And there will be noise, and there will be music played at their practices. There will be night games all the time. And how will that be addressed?
Okay, and most of that is not a wholesale change. I mean, we already do have the night games and the music for the games and whatnot. And we have met extensively with our neighbors over the last few years. And I think we're in a really good spot right now. We've been able to put, for lack of a better term, a governor on our PA system, so it only goes so loud. You know, I've been out in the neighborhood where those folks, we've met them at their homes and chatted with them. I think we're in a pretty good place with that, come to some sort of understanding that, yes, there are going to be some evenings where we have outstanding support. There's going to be a big crowd here, and what we do, we feel we're doing a better job of making sure they understand when those are going to be. You know, for instance, we knew we were going to have a prom out there last spring, so they knew, you know, at X hours, yeah, it's going to get a little noisy out here, but they knew going in that was going to be the case. So it'll be incumbent upon us to communicate well with them.
So we usually don't have those noise complaints. I know we tried to have a football game in October, and we were told that we couldn't have an announcer because of the neighborhood noise.
And I think that's been mitigated since.
Okay,
Yep.
good to know.
I had two questions. They were about lifespan and maintenance, so thank you, Kevin and Jennifer. So I don't have any questions. I will say I was pretty skeptical of the need for a turf field. This was a very effective presentation. Thank you all. It was really good.
That's why we're here. Thanks.
Well done. Thank you for doing that. Is there, I think I probably can guess the answer to this, but is there an opportunity for revenue here if we're not using the field?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes, but I would say, candidly, that's probably minimal. I mean, we'll get so much use out of it of our own community, and that would be the clear priority, would be our community members first. But certainly, there would be an opportunity, yeah.
Okay. I like all of Jennifer's questions. That was fantastic. 2.5.
You guys are a well-oiled machine. You know what each other thinks.
$2.5 million is a lot of money. I think that this, you know, if it gets the support, I think it's an okay thing to put forward to the voters. The only comment I would make is the timing is kind of hard, and especially for our sort of older people in town, it's going to be seen as a luxury. And so I will oppose grouping it in with the new school. I think it should be its own item, and if the voters support that, then that's a good thing, I guess. And the only thing, other thing I would mention, if we get to a point where we have a turf field, I think it'll be important to balance the time appropriately. I can imagine, like the kids with a new car, there's going to be a lot of people fighting over it, and so, you know, I'm sure you'll do a good job managing that. So there's.
Fortunately, I've had that experience, and it's easily manageable because everybody gets a fair crack at it.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Again, second to last, but I am in full support of a turf field. When it was proposed, I guess a year ago, I was trying to push for it to North Yarmouth, but now we're getting the school in North Yarmouth. I feel comfortable circling back and having it on campus. And you did a great presentation, and I
had a lot of help, so thank you.
I'm not sure, to Jason's point, if coupling it with the school, or is there another different time frame that we can do that? I'm not sure which way that should be.
Our options, I'll just weigh in on that for a minute. Our options are that we can put it as a separate question on the referendum if we choose to. It doesn't necessarily have to be added into the school project. It can be the school project as one referendum question, and the turf field is a separate question. So we can do that separately.
But I think we just have to.
I'll just add that we have a workshop scheduled for the next meeting on March 21st for the board to be able to talk about all of this, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure this presentation happened tonight, so that you can weigh all the pieces of whatever is going forward to a referendum in June. If June is your date, just kind of settle all these things that are kind of up in the air, because there's some votes that will have to be taken at some point soon.
But it is proposed to be voted on for the turf field in June, or is that undecided?
So that's a discussion
Okay.
that we're going to have, and we've created workshop time for that at our next meeting.
Okay. Great presentation in support of the turf field.
Thank you.
Thank you for the information. It certainly gave me a lot more things to think about that I hadn't thought of coming into this, just because my knowledge base on turf fields admittedly is very low. I think the only thing that I have to note is that I also would want it separate from the new school. I'd want it to be its own question. But otherwise, you know, I think I see there's a lot of value in it, and thank you to everyone for coming out.
Thanks. Thank you. Fellas, did I catch everything? Did I miss anything? Thumbs up? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for yours.
We will see you again, I'm sure, very soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, students, for sitting through
thank
the
you.
mask.
Yeah, thank
I know you were waiting for the turf field mostly, but thank you for being here.
I
Thank you
think
for
they all
sitting
just
through it.
wanted to rip their mask off.
Yeah.
Thanks again, folks.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Okay, so we do still have an opportunity for public comment. Believe it or not. If anybody would like to speak about something besides all of these other
Something
things.
else.
Anybody?
I'm going to assume that there's no one here for that. So we'll move into communications. The only thing I'd like to say under communications is that Thursday, this is so strange, this Thursday will be the last municipal coffee chat at the Prince Memorial Library. I'd like to say thank you to Mike Williams. Who else did it? Peter?
No, I didn't.
And you did it three times?
Yeah, making me hang out with the council.
Okay, so actually just Mike Williams.
No, I think Peter did it once.
No, I didn't.
Oh, and Ann, yes, of course. And I will be attending this last one. We just want to say thank you. It was a good way for people to know about and learn about how to run for office and what that might look like. So thank you. All right, next we have superintendent's report, which I believe is a first read of the 22-23 calendar.
Yes, as part of the report tonight, I just want to provide the information. This is the first read, so the calendar is not scheduled to be approved by the board until March 21st. First I want to say up front thank you to Susie Robbins, who's the Director of Academic Services. Susie carried all the weight for the calendar this year. I did some of the regional stuff with the other superintendents, and then she took it from there. And in your packet, I provided information on how the calendar was vetted out with various people, including checking in with someone who's very knowledgeable about holidays, all the holidays in our community, who had a chance to look through this, and also with the association, the leadership team. We've had a number of people looking at this calendar. We had a very different process this year. A lot of the calendar is set regionally because we cannot be more than 5 days dissimilar from all the other sending districts that send to the Portland Regional Arts and Technology High School in Portland, so we all have to be on the same page. So a lot of these things are kind of in place before we even get to doing anything locally. However, we do have some decisions that we make, and we certainly have holidays that we need to work around. We did have a couple of those issues that came up in the fall, if you recall. So we worked directly with somebody who had that knowledge base. Susie worked with that person to make sure that we were being respectful of any of those days. We've also done that, the same thing as we've been planning our open house times, which you will not see on this calendar necessarily, but we have those dates running, and we're making sure that we're staying away from those things. So I'm pretty confident that we have caught everything. The only thing I'd ask the board is if you would look through the calendar as well. Even though we've had multiple sets of eyes on this thing, it's always great to have more. So if you see anything that looks out of place or that we might have missed, if you could please bring it to our attention prior to the next meeting so we can get on it. This school year draft calendar would have 3 staff days prior to the beginning of the school year. Most of our staff seem to like having 3 days instead of 2, even though it starts on a Friday. That was okay, there's a weekend right there. And having school starting on August 31st, which is a Wednesday before Labor Day. So we're going back before Labor Day for this next year instead of after Labor Day, which we did this year, returning to our old schedule. The other changes were parent conferences. You'll note that there's some parent conference times on here, but we're also loosening up the parent conference the rest of the times that teachers can do them, and each school is coming up with their own schedule, which is really the way we used to do it. And this will be a lot more flexibility for our teachers and our parents. Next year, we'll most likely, next year, not this year, be offering choices on different conference formats for parents if they want to come in person or if they want to be remote. That will be next year for this. We also have 3 snow days instead of 2. That would be, or storm days, I should say. That would be made up at the end of the year. This year we have 2, so we added 1 to 3. We were able to do that and just making sure that we are respectful of Juneteenth, which is on the 19th, which is a Monday. And so we would have school being completed for having 3 storm days after the 13th. We'd go to Friday the 16th if there are 3 storm days. So that's a change. We did have 2. We got a lot of feedback that people really like those traditional snow days, and if we can do 3, so we included 3 in this calendar. I don't think there are any other significant changes in the calendar that you'll see. Everything else looks generally like what you would expect. We did put some more commentary in the calendar for things like making sure we got the grade 9 orientation date. There's certain years when we've had it in there, certain years we haven't. We made sure that was in there so that people were aware of it. And so again, if you have any comments or questions, please let me know prior to the next meeting so that we can clean that up for the second read.
That's a good question. Go ahead.
Peter?
Just very, very briefly, have we taken care of the situation with the Jewish holidays?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we have. We have reached out to someone who is very knowledgeable. Susie worked with that person in our community and made sure that we were respectful of all of the Jewish holidays.
Thank you.
Jeff, how many student attendance days are required by the state? Is
The
it
state-
175?
175, it's still 175. And this year, there's no waiver, so we are doing the 175 this year.
Right, and we have 176 on the calendar for next year?
Yes, and that's going back to what we've always done before. So we have 176 student days next year.
Always trying to overachieve?
We always like to. No, this is actually more typical. For the last couple of years, we've either had a waiver or whatnot, but we're going back to 176.
I have 2 quick questions. You meant the parent conferences. I thought I heard you say those potentially could be in person if possible, or is it going to be, we're still sorting that out?
For this spring, we're sorting that out. So I think we're still not done with that conversation. Next year, it would definitely be a choice, starting in the fall.
Awesome. My last question is, so why do we have pre-K and K start later? Because there's also, I've heard some of I would love to hear you say it to explain that, but also, to me also, that it would probably make sense to have them come in earlier and to start getting used to the school and their classes before all the other kids come in.
So for kindergarten, a lot of it's just orientation stuff for kindergarten at the beginning of the year and getting the rest of the school in place at Wilson School and having our kindergartners come in. The teachers meet with the kids, and it's really the first time that a lot of kids have been to a building of that size and getting acclimated. There's a bus trip that kids go on, and so there's a lot of beginning of year stuff for the kindergarten students to be involved with, and starting them on the same day as every other student in the school with over 700 kids. Pretty overwhelming. So we've been doing that for quite a while, and I think it's worked well. The kindergarten teachers have felt that it's a better way to start the year. And then pre-K, trying to start pre-K with kindergarten, it just, quite honestly, it's too much. And having those 4-year-olds coming in even on the same day as kindergarten is starting. We really like them to have their own time.
So the matter of having staff effectively be prepared to get through those first days with the vast majority of students there, and then be prepared and ready to then bring in the kindergartners, and then a few days later the pre-Ks.
It's a better way to start the year,
Okay.
yeah, for that school.
Okay.
Scott, I'm probably forgetting another reason.
Transportation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a huge one with the younger students, is transportation, making sure that we have the routes are safe, all the student names in place, everybody ready to go, and that takes time to do, and when we're just getting the routes set up at the start of the year, that's why we do part of that delay that way.
Okay. The pre-K is half day again next year, is that right?
Yes, for another year, yep.
For
It'll be
one more year?
pre-K.
And then
Well, it'll be up to the board.
Okay.
To decide if it's going to be full day or not, but at
should
this
be.
point, we're not recommending it, and I think we'll stick with the format. At this point, I'll continue recommending that we continue with the format we've got, which is AM, PM.
Okay.
A lot of interest, a lot of interest in pre-K this year. Not that there isn't always, but a lot more than usual.
Jason.
I probably should know this, but what's the calculation for half-days? Is there any special formula, or does a half-day count as a full day if you get to a certain point?
Yep, once you serve basically lunch, or you make sure that kids are fed, it's considered a full day.
All right, so I was told once upon a time that we added hours on the other days to make up for that. Is that not true?
No.
No. All right, have we ever talked about moving the half-days to Fridays?
Yes, there was a whole committee that worked for
Not
13
tonight.
months. 13
Not
months.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we should visit that again, or?
Not tonight, but sure. Yeah.
I think we had 16 people on that committee for 13 months.
Yep.
Yeah. And the gist of that was,
Stick to the plan. Doesn't mean there's more conversation, but it was.
It was very thoroughly vetted by
Yeah.
parents. We had parents, staff, administrators, a couple board, or one or two board members. It was very well
We
vetted
probably
through.
have that presentation that could
Yes.
be shared.
Oh,
I
yes.
think that could be a value for you
Yes.
to look at.
We do have that.
You'll love it. So.
You'll love it.
I wasn't on the board then.
okay.
Sure.
I can send it to the board.
Seems logical. I've heard a lot of people ask for it, but.
Because most people will skip out on Friday.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I like the Wednesday half-day. I need a break.
The only other comment I had was if we could work towards using the red day, that verbiage at some point, like, because that's pretty much tied to the pandemic, right?
Red days are remote days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying you want to remove that so it doesn't sting as much?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just name it a remote day or some other fancy name, like just stop calling them red days, because we had that green, yellow, red thing, and.
Yeah, I understand that.
you know,
Yep.
just
We could call them
PTSD.
Maroon Days.
But that would get confusing with.
Oh, wait, yeah, because we
yeah,
actually
high
have
school can't
Maroon
do
Days.
that.
My bad.
We've clarified that red means remote, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
Why are we still, are you all set?
I'm done.
Okay. Why are we still defaulting to remote days? Like on Jason's point but can we just completely eliminate that as an option?
That's the board's choice. If you choose to have students just making up the days for storm days, which
Yep,
is
at
kind
the
of
end
the
of-
model we used to have prior to really the pandemic, and we started realizing, well, we could do something different.
Yeah.
They can be counted as school days. It is the board's choice if you want to approve the calendar that way and have students make up the days that are storm days. I think, before the pandemic, there were certain years when there were, I remember a year, quite literally, when there was 9 or 10 days, that were storm days. And so we were adding, there was one year when I thought we might go to July 1. And I don't think I was here, I think I was in my former district, but there have been some heavy winters. Now, we've seen lighter winters recently, so who
If we
knows?
want to, yeah.
But I do think it's, it's certainly something the board can consider if you don't
I
want
would
do
like to
remote
see
days.
like a cap on that, because honestly, the remote days are not all that beneficial, other than not going into July in the learning process. I just kind of feel like it was for the pandemic, and we should probably remove it.
Yeah, that's up
It's
to,
like a
it's a
default.
decision you want to, if you'll want to make it on the 21st, because the calendar would be set, and parents are already asking for the calendar.
Yeah.
So we really need to get it set, but that's certainly a board's choice if you choose to do that. I think there's a lot of feelings on the other side that, you know, even though it's maybe not the same as a school day, a red day, a remote day, a June day is, you know, especially later in June, is not a good school day either, especially as the heat, you know, takes on, and you know what's more. And it also kind of gives you an end point. We have kids that go to summer camps. We hear this every year, or used to hear it. Well, now the school is going towards the end of June, you know, we're just going to have to pull our kids out of school and send them to summer camp, or make that choice, or they don't go to summer camp. And I mean like away camps, stuff like that, or clinics, or college visits, or whatever it is. There's an end point that you know in the calendar that's predictable. So that's an argument we've heard a lot.
How many storm days do we have typically?
Five to six. You know, I mean, sometimes 5 to 7. Let me put 5 to 7. This year, I'm not going to say anything, but it's looking a little lower.
It is.
Depends on what happens next.
All right, I'm done.
And, good. All right, not that I don't value your input, I'm just happy that we're moving along. Okay, so I would just encourage the board to look at it. I remember when I first joined the board, there was a calendar and I didn't really look at it, and then 6 months later we were talking about calendar and we were told, oh, you voted on that in March. You can't change that. So it's one of those things that sneaks up on you later in the year. Committee reports.
Can we go first?
Yes, and then you guys can go home.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Madison, you can go first.
Oh, okay, cool. So I just wanted to bring up two things that are kind of, I guess, one, I discussed with, well, I have my own personal experience with both cases, discussed with friends, then discussed with my siblings who are in the middle school, all three of them, and then discussed with my siblings' friends. So I've gotten a couple of people's input. But there's a significant bullying problem I've found, that some students feel like there aren't really consequences for bullying, as though I was talking to my little sister's friend, and basically they felt that when there are cases of bullying, there aren't any ramifications. It's just going down to the office. Maybe the parents get a call, maybe not, but it doesn't really seem to do anything. And I don't exactly know, I don't exactly have a solution for that. I'm not saying that we should like punish the kids super harshly, but it seems that a lot of people are just getting let off with a slap on the wrist, and it's not doing enough. And instilling either more detentions or more serious conversations and more calls home would help that. I'm not exactly sure of a solution, but I wanted to make everyone aware of it. The second problem that I find more prevalent, at least in the high school, that was more of a middle school problem, and we know that middle school kids are not that great. But they're at the age. But at the high school, there's a very big problem with disrespect, whether it's to the teachers or just to the learning environment. Even though some teachers don't really mind side conversations, which everyone can appreciate once in a while, it can get really distracting for other students when some teachers just don't speak up almost. They will allow side conversations until a student is finally like, can you guys please be quiet? Which not everyone is willing to do that. I'm a very forward person and blunt. I will speak my mind, especially if I can't focus in class and students are being too loud. I will turn around and ask them to be quiet, but not everyone is like that. We can't ask students to be like that. And I think that it's just kind of a problem, and that teachers need to be a little, some, not all, but some teachers do need to be a little bit more on top of either whether it's discipline or just saying you guys need to quiet down. Most teachers are great at it, but it's been a problem in multiple classrooms of my own and peers of mine.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think I see that a lot too. I see an even bigger problem with substitute teachers who get played like a fiddle by students, because they're just like, you know, they have no attachment to this class. They don't, like, they're just gonna let it go. But yeah, it's really disrupting to the learning environment.
I would encourage both of you to speak with your administrators in your building.
Yeah.
That's the best place for you to take these concerns. And it's great that you're talking with other students, but that really is the best place for you guys to find some traction with that conversation.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
agree.
done mine, so.
Oh, okay. Avery, go ahead.
Unless Jeff has something to say. but-
No, I wanted to hear what you had to say, Avery, then I was going to just say one quick thing.
Oh, yeah, my last thing will be about junior privileges. This is going to be probably the last thing ever on
Okay.
junior privileges, so you're
Let's hear
welcome. I've heard a lot of different things. There's no real clear communication. I've had, faculty tell me that junior privileges is not happening. I had Don Gray right there tell me that they were happening. I've had different people telling me that they're still in debate, and it'd be nice if there was like some clear communication about that.
So I can
That's
tell you
all.
what I know.
Yeah,
I actually
that'd be
know
great.
something about junior privileges, is that the student government has been working with Mr. Gray on this, and they were working with him on a proposal. They not finally, but worked on it, gave it to him, and that they are discussing it. And I think, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe if it's going to happen, it would be during the last quarter of the school year, if it's going to happen.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I know.
That's if.
Let's touch base about it offline after this meeting.
Okay.
Or tomorrow or something.
And I'll just quickly say about the bullying piece. I think this has been a rough year for everyone getting back into school, what school is. Over the last 2 years, I think it's been more difficult. We've seen more instances of students just kind of, acting out in certain ways, more than we've ever seen before, in at least the years I've been here. And I think it's been challenging, for everybody to work that through. The other piece is, you made a very good point. There's a lot of substitute teachers that we've had in and out. We've had a lot of staff shortages. Teachers are not always in. They, if they're out ill or their kids are ill or whatnot. We've had a lot of that this year, and I think that is certainly contributing to some of the behaviors that you mentioned, both of you mentioned. But it's certainly something we need to continue talking about as an administrative team. So thank you.
Thank you both. And we made an agreement that you could leave at 9:30, but it's way past that.
Yeah,
You guys
it's
can
like
take
almost
off
10.
if you guys need to. Thank you for being
All right.
here.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Okay. All right, back to committee reports. We will start with Kevin Desmond in Finance.
Okay, so obviously, given the hour, I'll be real quick. A couple dates to know. The 9th, which is someday later this week, there is a Finance Committee meeting. This is kind of our pregame for the superintendent's presentation on the 21st, where he shows you his budget. Now, a couple things. One thing that I want to talk about, and that is energy. Energy. Because anybody who has looked at their domestic bills know that it is not a party right now. And here, I asked Mr. Poulin to put together some numbers for us, because he began to talk about looking at the future not being kind of challenging. And so you're looking at really a 2-year run, 2 years ago, last year, and then the forecasting for next year. It really does tell a challenging story. And I'll just give you 3 highlights. Talking about water and sewer, that's going to take a 15.42% jump in our best estimation. And translating that to dollars, the difference between last and this will be around 11,000. Looking at natural gas, a similar percentage, 13.5, but that translates into just below 50,000 of a potential increase looking forward. And then electricity itself, and I haven't opened an electrical bill in a while, but looking at hours, this is going to be a challenge for us. That is looking at a 52.35% increase. That represents in excess of 204,000. Now, these numbers are challenging. We're looking very, very closely at these. We have done a number of energy projects to try to mitigate these, and had we not done those, I think that we would be in much more challenging straits. But it is something that Mr. Poulin is beginning to take a look at going back in history to an energy reserve fund, as we have historically, again, to dampen the curve to the extent possible, to use reserve dollars for situations like we're heading towards. And I think it's the most prudent fiscal management that we can do. Do you want to add on any of that, or?
Just the other, it's not simply just the increase in the utility bills, it's also the increase in usage. And that has to do with, a lot to do with the modular classrooms that we've added on the campus. You know, bottled gas, natural gas, and the electricity, you know, quite frankly, has come in higher than I thought it would on the usage of those facilities. So.
Yeah. And we haven't been able to, I mean, obviously we need to, and we're running things at a higher rate. I think that it is something that we all really need to consider as we look at this potential new building as well, and understanding what we're walking into. So I want to put that on everyone's radar. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, to that exact point, that should only further us to consider a very energy efficient new building and a solar field. And we should consider these numbers when we're looking at potential upfront costs of an initial investment of putting a significant amount of solar power on any new project, because it will help defray it won't help these costs right now, but 5-10 years down the road, this is the sort of investment that we will make that will help prevent this.
100%. So when folks gasp at that up front, I think these numbers support that, and then falls on our shoulders to continue talking about that as much as we can. So excellent point.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And policy?
First, I'll begin with what's on the agenda tonight that we're voting on, just so everyone knows. The policies that were recommended for deletion, JLCEE, which is the policy regarding do not resuscitate requests. That policy is no longer needed. It's covered under other plans and policies. And then also JJF, Student Activities Funds Management, also no longer needed due to the fact that all of our fees are covered by the central office accounting and not at the building level. We met earlier today and wrapped up our discussion on IJJ, selection of educational materials, which we'll be sending back to Drummond and Woodsum for their review on some outstanding questions that we had. Pending that, it will be coming to the board for first read. And our next meeting is March 15th to discuss BED, remote participation in school board meetings.
Great, thank you, Ann. Facilities, Peter?
Tyler, Jeff, and myself made presentations to both the Cumberland Town Council and the North Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, and they went reasonably well, and we've got general endorsement from both of them. Right now, we are doing extensive engineering work on the site, and we have encountered a few issues, and so I think both finance and facilities will be getting together shortly to evaluate these engineering studies and see where we go from here. And I don't know if you're going to cover it, Tyler, but I think there's been some discussions as far as the solar is concerned that the towns are going to kind of work with us taking the lead, because we're going to need a significantly bigger field than what the town has, so it's being worked on. That's
Yeah,
all.
I'll just add to that,
Yeah.
that there's some energy around. Solar has been talked about in all three groups, right? We've talked about it here at the district ever since I've been on the board. Obviously, Cumberland has a farm that they are using, and there was a committee in 2021 in North Yarmouth. And so it only makes sense that we would combine efforts, and also capacity reasons. You know, it can't be just on the school
Right.
to produce and put together a project like that. Plus, we have really great people in this community that have done this work, specifically in Cumberland, that we can learn from. So there should be some more coming from that. But
That's all I have.
Yep, excellent. Jennifer, curriculum.
Curriculum, we met last week, and pretty much the focus was talking about math, and the high school did a great report on reviewing for new math textbooks, which sounds super exciting. Then Mari in the middle school discussed the math programming and looking ahead to changes that need to come about, not this coming year, but the following year. It's nice to see that they're being very proactive to making sure we're set up for success there. And Susie talked a little bit about the math scores in the fall and kind of the timing of getting when the spring testing will be. And we're putting it on the calendar to have that reported out in June to this board with those scores.
Awesome, thank you. Mike, communications?
The Communications Committee is so hard at work that a major communication just went out to the whole district about the vote on masks. No, I'm kidding. I had nothing to do with that. Jeff, I'm impressed you're able to get a giant email out mid-meeting. No, the next step for the Communications Committee is to convene in the next, hopefully, couple weeks to coordinate on communications around the building project.
Yes.
Thanks for not mentioning that I put your MSAD 51 families twice. Just to make sure it was very clear.
You're yelling at them.
I'll do a quick update for the Equity Committee. We have a meeting on the 16th. We have not met since last time there was an update, so I don't really have anything for that. Student reports we have done.
Tyler, can I
Yes.
just make one comment? Number 6 on the agenda is communications. We just jumped over that. Usually it isn't a big deal.
No, I did communications.
We did?
Yeah, I talked about the municipal coffee chats.
Oh, sorry.
That's
I was
okay.
sleeping.
That's okay. I'm just glad I'm glad I didn't miss it.
In terms of ad hoc, we haven't had an outdoor learning committee meeting in a while, but just related to that, I do want to note that we were presented to by the Greeley Climate Action Team a number of months ago, and they gave us a draft resolution, and I haven't had the chance to sit with it, but I'm going to, just so folks know, put some time into it, and hopefully we can start to think about that and talk it through
That sounds great.
at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for following up on that. I appreciate that. All right, moving into our items for action. Looking for a motion for the first item, delete policy JJF.
I'm asking that we vote to approve removing policy JJF, Student Activities Funds Management, from the policy manual.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor? Great. Dan, you want to take the next one?
Yep. I also ask that we vote to approve removing policy JLCEE, policy regarding do not resuscitate requests from the policy manual.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor?
I'll go ahead and say that I would like to vote that the resolution entitled Resolution to Authorize Term Extension of Modular Classroom Leases be adopted in form presented to this meeting.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or comments on this? Okay. All in favor? Great, thank you. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually.
You're going to have a better day.